In a dimly lit London flat, Hercule Poirot opens a chilling letter. 7 of his deadliest foes have united to destroy him. As a cryptic symbol of 7 rings haunts his every move, a murder in King's Abbot echoes his past triumphs, pulling him into a deadly game of wits. With Captain Hastings and Miss Lemon by his side, Poirot must unravel a conspiracy of vengeance before the shadows claim him. Will the master detective outsmart his enemies, or will this be his final case? Chapter 1. The cryptic letter. The rain fell in a steady, mournful rhythm against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting wavering shadows across the polished oak floor. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward 8:30. Its soft chime barely audible over the patter of the storm outside. Poirot sat in his favourite armchair, a high-backed piece upholstered in rich burgundy, his small, precise hands folded neatly over a leather-bound volume of Montaigne's essays. The fire in the grate crackled, sending a warm glow over his immaculate black suit and the gleaming tips of his patent leather shoes. His moustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he turned a page, though his sharp green eyes betrayed a restlessness that the book could not quell. The flat was a study in order and elegance, much like the man himself. Shelves lined with books, philosophy, literature, and treatises on criminology stood sentinel along one wall, their spines aligned with military precision. A silver tray on the sideboard held a crystal decanter of port and 2 glasses, untouched since Captain Hastings' last visit. The air carried a faint scent of lavender polish, a testament to the meticulous care of Poirot's housekeeper, Mrs. Ellis. Yet tonight, the harmony of the room felt disrupted, as though the storm outside had brought with it an undercurrent of unease. Poirot's gaze drifted from the page to the window, where raindrops raced one another down the glass. He had been semi-retired for nearly a year, taking only the occasional case that piqued his intellectual curiosity. The world, he often remarked to Hastings, seemed to grow more chaotic, its crimes less elegant, its villains less worthy of his attention. The little grey cells, mon ami, he would say, tapping his temple, they demand a challenge, not a cacophony. Yet the quiet of retirement, while orderly, had begun to chafe. He missed the thrill of the chase, the moment when a puzzle's pieces clicked into place under the relentless logic of his mind. A sharp rap at the door startled him from his reverie. He closed the book with a soft thud and glanced at the clock. 8:35. Mrs. Ellis had retired to her quarters an hour ago, and no visitors were expected. The knock came again, more insistent, a staccato beat that matched the rain's urgency. Poirot rose, smoothing his jacket, and crossed to the door with the measured steps of a man who never hurried without reason. He opened the door to find no one. The hallway, dimly lit by a single sconce, stretched empty in both directions, its carpet muffling any sound of retreating footsteps. A gust of damp air swept in, carrying the scent of wet wool and city soot. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he scanned the shadows, his senses alert. Then, at his feet, he noticed a small, cream-coloured envelope, its edges slightly damp from the rain. It bore no stamp, no address, only his name in a flowing, unfamiliar script. M. Hercule Poirot. He bent to retrieve it, his movements precise despite the twinge in his knees, a reminder of age he preferred to ignore. Closing the door, he returned to his armchair, the envelope held delicately between his fingers as though it were a piece of evidence. The paper was thick, expensive, with a faint watermark of a crest he did not recognize. He slit it open with a silver letter opener, revealing a single sheet of matching stationery. The message, written in the same elegant hand, was brief but chilling. Monsieur Poirot, 7 shadows from your past have gathered. They weave a net to ensnare you, to extinguish the light of your little grey cells. Beware the circle of 7, for their vengeance is patient and their reach is long. The game begins with the death in King's Abbot. Act swiftly, or the shadows will prevail. The council of 7 below, the signature, a symbol was inked in black, 7 interlocking rings, each touching its neighbours to form a perfect circle. Poirot's moustache quivered as he read the letter again, his mind racing. The reference to King's Abbot stirred a memory, the murder of Roger Ackroyd, one of his most celebrated cases, where Dr. Shepherd's cunning deception had nearly outwitted him. But Shepherd was dead, his fate sealed years ago. Who, then, were these 7 shadows? And what was this council of 7? He rose and paced the room, the letter still in hand. The firelight caught the edges of the paper, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to dance with the ring's design. Poirot's first instinct was to dismiss the letter as a prank, the work of a disgruntled former suspect or a sensationalist seeking attention. Yet the specificity of King's Abbot, the quality of the stationery, and the symbol's deliberate artistry suggested otherwise. This was no idle threat. It was a challenge, crafted with care to provoke him. He crossed to the sideboard and poured a small measure of port, the ruby liquid catching the light as he swirled it in the glass. Sipping it, he considered his options. To ignore the letter was to invite danger, for if the threat was real, inaction could prove fatal. To act required Alice's men and women he trusted to navigate the labyrinth this council had laid before him. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend, was the first who came to mind. Hastings, with his earnest heart and unerring loyalty, had been at Poirot's side through countless cases. Miss Felicity Lemon, his secretary, was another her organizational. Genius and unyielding precision would be invaluable. And perhaps Inspector Japp, now retired from Scotland Yard but still sharp, could lend his authority and resources. Poirot set the glass down and returned to his desk, where a brass telephone sat beside a neat stack of correspondence. He dialed Hastings' number, the rotary clicking softly in the quiet room. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered, warm but tinged with surprise. "Poirot, old chap, what's this, calling at such an hour? Don't tell me you're bored, with retirement already." "Mon ami," Poirot said, his tone grave, "I require your presence at once. A matter of great urgency has arisen. Bring your revolver, if you please, and your courage. We may have need of both." Hastings, sensing the seriousness in Poirot's voice, agreed to come immediately. As Poirot hung up, he glanced at the letter again, his eyes lingering on the symbol of the 7 rings. The game, as the letter had promised, had begun. But Hercule Poirot was no mere pawn. He would play, and he would win. Within the hour, Hastings arrived, his overcoat dripping from the rain. His face, still boyish despite the lines of middle age, was flushed with concern as he hung his hat on the rack and crossed to the fire to warm his hands. "Good heavens, Poirot, you sounded like the world was ending. What's this all about?" Poirot handed him the letter, watching as Hastings read it, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. "The Council of 7, Hastings said, looking up. "Sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. You don't think it's serious, do you?" "I think, mon ami, that it is very serious indeed," Poirot replied, seating himself opposite. "Hastings, the reference to King's Abbot is no coincidence. It is a case that tested me, One where the murderer Dr. Shepard nearly succeeded through his deception. Whoever wrote this letter knows my history intimately. They seek to unsettle me, to draw me into their game. Hastings frowned, rereading the letter. But Shepard's gone. You solved that case years ago. Could it be a relative? Someone seeking revenge? Perhaps, Poirot said, steepling his fingers. Or perhaps it is not Shepard himself, but his methods, his legacy. The letter speaks of 7 shadows. I suspect these are 7 individuals, their agents drawn from my past, each with a grievance. The symbol of the rings suggests unity, a conspiracy. We must discover who they are and what they intend. Hastings leaned back, his eyes wide. 7 enemies, all working together. That's a tall order, even for you. Where do we start? With King's Abbot, Poirot said firmly. The letter mentions a death there. We must go at once and see if this threat has substance. But first, I will summon Miss Lemon. Her skills will be essential in tracing these shadows through my records. He reached for the telephone again, but before he could dial, a sharp clatter came from the hallway, metallic sound, like something heavy striking the floor. Poirot froze, his hand hovering over the receiver. Hastings sprang to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver in his coat pocket. Stay here, Hastings whispered, moving toward the door. Poirot shook his head, his eyes bright with alertness. Non, mon ami. We face this together. They crept to the door, Poirot's small frame surprisingly agile beside Hastings' taller, broader one. The hallway was dark, the sconce flickering, as though caught in a draught. At the foot of the stairs, they found the source of the noise, a small brass box, no larger than a cigarette case, lying on the carpet. It had not been there when Hastings arrived. The lid was engraved with the same symbol of 7 rings, and a faint ticking sound emanated from within. Good Lord, Hastings muttered. Is that what I think it is? Poirot knelt, his face calm but focused. A device, perhaps, but not a bomb. The ticking is too irregular. He lifted the box with a handkerchief, turning it carefully. A slip of paper was tucked beneath it, bearing a single line in the same script as the letter. The first shadow watchers. Poirot opened the box, revealing a pocket watch, its hands frozen at midnight. Inside the lid, etched in fine script, were the words, King's Abbot, tomorrow. He closed it with a snap, his expression unreadable. They play their game with flair, he said, rising. But they underestimate Hercule Poirot. Come, Hastings. We have preparations to make. The next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving London bathed in a pale, watery light. Poirot's flat buzzed with activity as Miss Felicity Lemon arrived, her severe bun and crisp blouse as impeccable as ever. She carried a leather satchel filled with files Poirot's meticulously organized case records, which she had maintained for years. Her face, usually a mask of efficiency, betrayed a flicker of concern as Poirot briefed her on the letter and the box. A conspiracy of 7, she said, adjusting her glasses. That's highly irregular, Mr. Poirot. I'll need to cross-reference your cases for enemies with motive and opportunity. It could take days. Then we must work swiftly, Poirot replied. Begin with the murder of Roger Ackroyd. Look for any surviving associates of Dr. Shepard family, friends, or those who might have studied his methods, and check for mentions of this symbol, the 7 rings. It may appear in other cases. Miss Lemon nodded, already unpacking her files on the dining table. I'll have a preliminary report by this afternoon. Shall I contact Inspector Japp? Oui, s'il vous plaît, Poirot said. His resources at Scotland Yard, though he is retired, may still prove useful. Tell him to meet us at King's Abbot by evening. As Miss Lemon set to work, Poirot and Hastings prepared for their journey. Hastings packed a small suitcase, muttering about the audacity of the council, while Poirot selected a travelling coat and his sturdiest cane, its silver head gleaming. He tucked the letter and the watch into his pocket, their weight a constant reminder of the challenge ahead. Before leaving, Poirot paused at his desk, where a framed photograph of his old friend Ariadne Oliver sat beside a vase of fresh roses. Mrs. Oliver, the flamboyant mystery writer, had often teased him about his ego, but her insights into human nature had proven invaluable. He considered calling her, then decided against it. This was his battle, at least for now. The train to King's Abbot was a sleek express, its compartments plush with velvet seats and polished wood. Poirot and Hastings settled in, the countryside rolling past in a blur of green fields and hedgerows. Hastings, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood with tales of his recent golfing misadventures. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, turning over the letter's words like pieces of a jigsaw. Tell me, Hastings, he said at length, what strikes you most about this threat? Hastings rubbed his chin. The organization of it, I suppose. 7 enemies, all working together. That takes planning, resources, and the symbol those rings. It's almost theatrical, precisement, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. It is a performance designed to unsettle me. But every performance has a director, a mind behind the curtain. We must find this mind, or the shadows will multiply. The train whistle blew, signalling their approach to King's Abbot. Poirot straightened his tie, his face set with determination. The game had begun, and he would not falter. King's Abbot was much as Poirot remembered it, a quaint village of thatched cottages and winding lanes, its heart dominated by the church, spire, and the sprawling manor of Fernley Park. Yet the air felt heavier now, as though the village sensed the shadow cast by the letter. Poirot and Hastings checked into the King's Arms, a cosy inn with creaking floors, and a landlord who remembered Poirot's last visit with a mix of awe and unease. Terrible business. That Ackroyd case, the landlord said, pouring them tea in the parlour. Never thought we'd see the like again. But there's been talk, sir, of strange goings-on lately. A death, just yesterday, up at the Grange. Poirot's cup paused halfway to his lips. A death. Tell me, monsieur, what happened? The landlord leaned in, his voice low. Old Mr. Carver lived alone at the Grange, found stabbed in his study, with the door locked from the inside. Just like Mr. Ackroyd, they say. The police are baffled, but there's whispers of a stranger in the villager man with a limp. Seen near the Grange the night before, Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. The letter had spoken true, a death in King's Abbot echoing. The Ackroyd case, the first shadow had struck. They finished their tea and set out for the Grange, a Georgian manor on the village outskirts. Inspector Japp was waiting for them, his trilby hat tilted back and a cigarette dangling from his lips. Retirement had softened his edges, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Poirot. You old devil, Japp said, shaking his hand. Heard you were coming. This Carver business is a right mess. Locked room, no weapon, and a village full of gossip. Sounds like your kind of puzzle. Indeed, mon ami, Poirot said, surveying the Grange's ivy-covered facade. But this is no isolated crime. It is the opening move in a larger game. Come, let us see what the little grey cells can uncover. The study where Carver died was a mirror of Ackroyd's, heavy oak furniture, shelves of books, and a single chair overturned beside the body's outline, marked in chalk on the rug. The windows were bolted, the door's lock intact. Carver, a retired solicitor, had been stabbed through the heart, the wound clean and precise. No knife was found, but a scrap of paper lay on the desk, bearing the 7-ring symbol and a single word. One Poirot knelt beside the chalk outline, his gloved fingers tracing the rug's fibres. "The method is deliberate," he murmured. "A locked room, a missing weapon, a victim of status. It is Dr. Shepherd's crime, recreated with care. But why? To taunt me, to prove their skill." Hastings peered over his shoulder. Could the killer still be in the house, hidden, like in one of those secret passages you're always finding? Poirot smiled faintly. "You read too many novels, Hastings, but your instinct is not entirely wrong. The killer wished to be seen, yet unseen. The stranger with the limp." "Perhaps," Japp snorted. "We've got men combing the village for him. No luck yet, but there's something else, Poirot." Carver's diary found it open on the desk. "Last entry mentions a visitor, someone claiming to know you. Said they had. A warning about 7 enemies." Poirot's mustache twitched. A warning, or a lure, to ensure Carver's death would draw me here. "Show me this diary." The diary's final page was written in a shaky hand, detailing a late-night visit from a man who refused to give his name. He spoke of M. Poirot, said 7 enemies from his past were plotting revenge. Begged me to warn him. I thought him mad, but his eyes, they frightened me. The entry ended abruptly, as though Carver had been interrupted. Poirot closed the diary, his mind racing. The stranger was no ally. He was part of the council's plan, planting the seed of fear to ensure Poirot's involvement. The locked room, the symbol, the diarial, were pieces of a performance, designed to challenge his intellect and unsettle his calm. As they left the Grange, dusk was falling, the village lights twinkling like stars against the darkening fields. Poirot paused at the gate, his cane tapping the ground thoughtfully. "This is but the first act, Mes Amis," he said. "The Council of 7 has shown their hand, but they do not yet know mine. We return to London tonight. Miss Lemon will have answers, and we must prepare for the next shadow." Hastings clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit, Poirot. We'll catch these blighters, you'll see." Japp grinned. "Never bet against Poirot's grey cells. But watch your back, old friend. This lot means business." Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The rain had begun again, a soft drizzle that blurred the village into a watercolour haze. The first shadow had struck, but Hercule Poirot was ready. The game was afoot, and he would not rest until the Council of 7 was unmasked. Back in London, Miss Lemon greeted them with a stack of neatly typed notes. Her research had uncovered a troubling pattern. Several of Poirot's past cases, including the murder of Roger Ackroyd, had loose ends associates of the guilty who had vanished or expressed public resentment. She had also found a reference to the 7-ring symbol in an obscure criminology journal linked to a secret society that operated in Europe decades ago. The society, known as Les Sept Circles, had been rumoured to orchestrate high-profile. Chapter 2. The ghost of King's Abatha, trained to King's Abbot, rattled through the English countryside. Its rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the turmoil in Hercule Poirot's mind. Seated in a first-class compartment, he stared out at the rolling hills, his gloved hands folded neatly over the head of his cane. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings fidgeted, his brow furrowed as he glanced at the cryptic letter clutched in Poirot's hand. The paper, now creased from repeated readings, bore the ominous warning of 7 shadows and the symbol of 7 interlocking rings. Tucked alongside it was the newspaper clipping about a murder in King's Abettor crime that bore an unsettling resemblance to the case of Roger Ackroyd, one of Poirot's most celebrated triumphs. Poirot, Hastings said, breaking the silence, "I don't like this one bit. An anonymous letter, a murder that mimics Shepard's crime. It's too neat, too deliberate. Someone's playing a game with you." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile curling beneath it. "A game, mon ami, oui, but it is a game of the mind, and Hercule Poirot is no stranger to such challenges. This letter, this murder, this are invitations. The question is, who extends them, and why?" Hastings leaned back, unconvinced. "All I'm saying is, be careful. Shepard was a cunning devil. If someone's taken up his mantle, they're not to be underestimated." Poirot nodded, his green eyes narrowing. Dr. Shepard was indeed a master of deception, but his downfall was his arrogance. "This new adversary, they seek to test me, to draw me into their web. I shall oblige, but on my terms." The train slowed as it approached King's Abbot, a quaint village nestled among hedgerows and stone walls. The station was small, with a single platform and a ticket office that looked as if it hadn't been painted since the war. As Poirot and Hastings disembarked, a chill wind swept across the platform, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. A local constable, a burly man with a ruddy face, awaited them, his expression a mix of awe and apprehension. "Mr. Poirot." "Sir," the constable said, tipping his hat. "I'm Constable Brooks. Inspector Japp sent word you'd be coming. Terrible business, this murder. Never seen anything like it in King's Abbot." "Bon," Poirot said, adjusting his scarf. "Take us to the scene, if you please. The little grey cells require facts, not rumours." The constable led them through the village, past ivy-covered cottages and a church with a weathered spire. King's Abbot had changed little since Poirot's last visit, when he had unravelled the mystery of Roger Ackroyd's death. Yet the air felt heavier now, as if the village itself sensed the shadow of its past. The crime scene was Fernley Park, a grand Georgian manor that had once belonged to Ackroyd, now owned by a wealthy industrialist named Harold Grayson. The manor stood at the edge of the village, its windows dark against the grey sky. As they approached, Poirot noted the police cordon and the cluster of officers milling about the entrance. The front door was ajar, and inside, the air was thick with the metallic temps of blood. Constable Brooks led them to the study, where Grayson's body lay slumped in an armchair, a dagger protruding from his chest. The room was eerily familiar, shelves lined with books, a heavy oak desk, and a window overlooking the garden. It was as if time had folded back on itself, recreating the night Ackroyd died. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning. The scene, the stage is set with precision. The dagger, the position of the body, is a tableau of the past. Hastings peered over his shoulder, his face pale. "It's uncanny, Poirot. It's as if Shepard himself walked out of his grave and did this." Poirot shook his head. "Nan, Hastings, Dr. Shepard is long dead, his secrets buried with him. But someone has studied his methods, his diary, perhaps. They wish to resurrect his legacy, to challenge me with it." Constable Brooks cleared his throat. "We found something odd, sir. A notebook, hidden in the desk. It's got, Well, it's got a story in it, like a confession, but it's all wrong. Makes it sound like Grayson's wife did it, but she's got an alibi for the village, saw her at the church bazaar when it happened. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A false narrator, just as Shepherd was. Show me this notebook. The constable retrieved a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with neat handwriting. Poirot flipped through it, his lips pursed. The text described Grayson's murder in vivid detail, implicating his wife, Margaret, in a tale of jealousy and betrayal. Yet the details were subtly off, timelines didn't align, motives felt contrived. It was a deliberate fabrication, designed to mislead. Clever, Poirot said, closing the notebook. This is the work of one who admires Shepherd's artifice. They craft a narrative to obscure the truth, but they underestimate Hercule Poirot. The truth, it always reveals itself to those who observe. He began to pace the room, his cane tapping softly against the floorboards. His gaze darted from the dagger to the desk, then to the window, where a faint smudge marred the glass. Kneeling, he examined the carpet, his fingers brushing against a tiny speck of ash. He sniffed it, his nose wrinkling. Tobacco, he said. Not English, but Turkish. Most unusual for King's Abbot. Hastings frowned. You think the killer? Smoked here, perhaps, Poirot replied. Or perhaps they wish us to think so. Every clue is a thread in their tapestry. We must unravel it carefully. The investigation continued through the afternoon, with Poirot interviewing Grayson's household. Margaret Grayson, a petite woman with tear-streaked cheeks, was distraught, but cooperative. She confirmed her alibi and expressed bewilderment at the notebook's accusations. The servants, too, offered little insight. Though Poirot noted the butler's nervous habit of twisting his cufflinks detail, he filed away for later. As dusk fell, Poirot and Hastings retired to the village in a cozy establishment called the Three Crowns. Over a dinner of shepherd's pie and stout, they discussed the case, the firelight casting shadows on the oak-panelled walls. It's got to be someone local, Hastings said, slicing into his pie. Who else would know about Ackroyd's murder in such detail? Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression thoughtful. Local, perhaps, but not necessarily. The diary of Dr. Shepherd was published posthumously, a curiosity for criminologists. Anyone with access could study it, could learn his methods. No, Hastings, we must look beyond the village. This is a mind that plans, that orchestrates. A knock at the door interrupted them. Constable Brooks entered, his face grim. Mr. Poirot, we've had a development. A man was seen leaving for park last night, just after the murder. A villager spotted him, tall, dark coat, carrying a satchel. He was heading toward the woods. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this villager, they are reliable. Old Mrs. Carter, Brooks said. She's half blind, but she swears she saw him. Says he moved like he knew the paths. Bon, Poirot said, rising. Then we shall explore these woods at first light. The killer, he leaves footprints, even if he thinks them hidden. Next morning, Poirot, Hastings, and Brooks ventured into the woods behind Fernley Park. The air was crisp, the ground damp with dew. Poirot moved with surprising agility, his eyes scanning the undergrowth for signs of disturbance. Near a clearing, he paused, pointing to a patch of trampled grass. Here, he said, someone stood, perhaps to watch the manor, and there see. The cigarette butt, Turkish, as I suspected. Hastings crouched beside it, his brow furrowed. You're saying the killer waited here, planning it all out? Oui, Poirot said. But planning is not enough. They must execute, and in execution They... As they searched, Brooks called out from a thicket, "Mr. Poirot, over here. There's something hidden in the brambles." Poirot hurried over, his cane parting the thorns. Nestled in the undergrowth was a satchel, its leather worn but intact. Inside, they found a bundle of papers, a vial of chloroform, and a note scrawled in a hurried hand, 1 of 7. Poirot's face darkened as he read the note. "The Council of 7, he murmured. They announce themselves boldly. This is no lone disciple of Shepherd, but a piece of a larger puzzle." The papers revealed more: diagrams of Fernley Park, a timeline of Grayson's movements, and excerpts from Shepherd's diary annotated with modern references. It was clear the killer had studied Shepherd's methods meticulously, adapting them to the present. Yet one detail stood out of reference: to a mentor who had guided the killer's hand. "A mentor," Poirot said, folding the papers. "This disciple does not act alone. They are a pupil, and the teacher is one of the 7 shadows." Back at the inn, Poirot spread the papers across a table, his fingers tracing the annotations. Hastings watched, his frustration mounting. "Poirot, how do we catch this fellow? He's slipped through our fingers, and now we've got this council business to worry about." "Patience, mon ami," Poirot said. "The killer is bold, but boldness breeds mistakes. They have left their satchel, their cigarette, their note. They wish to taunt, but in taunting they reveal." Over the next few days, Poirot delved deeper into the village's undercurrents. He questioned Mrs. Carter, who described the man in the dark coat as having a scholarly air, an observation that intrigued him. He visited the local library, where he learned that Shepherd's diary had been borrowed repeatedly by a visitor from London, a man named Victor Crane. Crane, a historian with a penchant for criminology, had rented a cottage on the village outskirts. Crane, Poirot mused, tapping his cane. A man who studies crime, who admires Shepherd's cunning. He fits the profile of our disciple. With Brooks' help, they searched Crane's cottage, finding it abandoned. The interior was sparse, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a hidden compartment in the fireplace. Inside was a journal, its pages filled with Crane's musings on Shepherd's genius and his own desire to surpass the master. The final entry was chilling. "Tonight I strike. The council watches, and number 1 approves." "Number 1, Hastings said, his voice tight. "Who the devil is that?" "The architect of this plot," Poirot said. "The one who unites the 7. Crane is but a pawn, a disciple eager to prove himself. We must find him before he strikes again." The search for Crane intensified. With Poirot and Brooks combing the village and surrounding countryside, Hastings, meanwhile, interviewed locals, uncovering rumors of a stranger seen at the train station the night of the murder. The station master recalled a man matching Crane's description boarding a late train to London, carrying a satchel. "He's gone to ground," Hastings said, exasperated. "We've lost him, Poirot." "None," Poirot said, his voice firm. "He has not escaped. He has retreated, but he will return. The council's game is not finished, and Crane is their first move. We shall be ready." As they prepared to return to London, Poirot received a telegram from Miss Lemon. Her research had uncovered a lead. Crane had ties to a literary society in London, one known for its fascination with criminal minds. The society's next meeting was in 2 days, and Crane was listed as a guest speaker. "Bon," Poirot said, folding the telegram. "We shall meet Monsieur Crane on his own territory. The ghost of King's Abbot has shown his face, but Hercule Poirot shall have the last word." The journey back to London was somber. the weight of the case pressing on them both. Hastings stared out the train window, his mind racing with questions. Poirot, do you really think this Council of Seven is real, or is it just Crane's delusion? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Real or not, mon ami, they believe. They can outwit me. That is their mistake. The little grey cells, they do not rest until the truth is laid bare. As the train pulled into King's Cross, Poirot clutched the satchel from the woods, its contents a map to the enemy's mind. The ghost of Dr. Shepherd loomed large, but Poirot was undaunted. The game had begun, and he would play it to the end. Chapter 3. The actresses charm Hercule Poirot. Adjusted his perfectly knotted tie and surveyed his reflection in the gilded mirror of his London flat. The morning had begun with its usual rhythm hot chocolate, served precisely at 8, the Times folded neatly by Miss Lemon, and Captain Hastings' cheerful arrival, his hat slightly askew from the brisk walk. Yet a subtle unease lingered, like a faint discord in an otherwise harmonious melody. The cryptic letter from 2 days prior, with its ominous warning of 7 shadows and the symbol of interlocking rings, had set Poirot's little grey cells humming. The newspaper clipping about a murder resembling the murder of Roger Ackroyd only deepened the puzzle. Now, as the clock struck 10, a new piece of the enigma arrived in the form of an embossed invitation. Miss Lemon, her efficiency as sharp as her pencil, handed it to Poirot. It arrived by courier, Mr. Poirot, from a Miss Vivian Carlyle. She requests your presence at a charity gala tonight at the Savoy Hotel. Most insistent, I'd say. Poirot's moustache twitched as he read the card. The handwriting was elegant, the tone deferential, yet something about it stirred a memory. Vivian Carlyle, he murmured, tapping the card against his palm. The name is unfamiliar, but the flourish id reminds me of someone. Hastings, what say you to a gala? A night of sparkle and suspicion, perhaps. Hastings, lounging in an armchair with a cup of tea, grinned. Sounds like just the thing to shake off this letter business, old chap. But you don't think it's a trap, do you? Those 7 shadows could be anywhere. Precisement, Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming, which is why we shall attend. The hunter does not catch the fox by staying in his den. Miss Lemon, please, a little research on this Miss Carlyle, her past, her connections, and, if you please, cross-reference with a certain Jane Wilkinson. Miss Lemon's eyebrows rose a fraction, but she nodded and retreated to her typewriter. Jane Wilkinson, the dazzling actress from Lord Edgware Dies, had been a master of charm and manipulation, her beauty a weapon as deadly as any knife. Though she was long gone, her shadow loomed in Poirot's mind. Could this Vivian Carlyle be a disciple, or something more? By afternoon, Miss Lemon returned with a dossier. Vivian Carlyle, aged 28, rising star of the London stage. Trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts under Madame Elise Fournier, who also mentored Jane Wilkinson 2 decades ago. Miss Carlyle's brother, Edward Carlyle, was arrested last month for the murder of a financier, though he claims innocence. The gala tonight benefits a children's hospital, but rumour has it Vivienne's using it to court influential allies. Nodded, his fingers steepled. A pattern emerges. The letter warns of shadows from my past, and now an actress with ties to Wilkinson seeks my aid. This is no coincidence, Hastings. We must be, as you English say, on our guard. The Savoy Hotel glittered under the evening sky, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over the ballroom. Poirot, impeccable in his black tie, moved through the crowd with the grace of a cat, his eyes scanning every face. Hastings, at his side, whispered, "Quite the turnout. Half of London's elite must be here. There's even Lord Whitmore, the Home Secretary's cousin. And they are all players in someone's game." Poirot replied softly. His gaze settled on a woman descending the grand staircase. Vivian Carlyle was a vision in emerald silk, her auburn hair cascading in waves, her smile radiant yet calculated. She glided toward Poirot, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that was almost theatrical. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand, "I'm honored you accepted my invitation. I've heard such tales of your brilliance." Poirot bowed, kissing her hand with old-world courtesy. "Mademoiselle Carlyle, the honor is mine. Your reputation precedes you, as does your cause." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "You mean my brother, Edward?" "He's innocent, monsieur." Poirot, framed by enemies who envy our family's success. "I hoped you might advise me." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "But first, let us enjoy the evening. Tell me, what inspired this gala?" Vivian led them to a private alcove, her voice low and earnest. "The Children's Hospital saved my cousin's life when we were young. I owe them everything. Tonight, we've raised nearly £10,000, but I need your help to clear Edward's name. Without him, our family crumbles." Poirot listened, his expression unreadable. Her story was compelling, her emotion convincing, yet something rang false. Her gestures, her pauses, they echoed Jane Wilkinson's calculated charm, as if Vivian had studied her predecessor's every move. Hastings, ever susceptible to a pretty face, seemed swayed, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, cataloguing details, the faint scent of her perfume, the way her eyes flicked to the crowd, the diamond brooch shaped like a ring. The gala proceeded, with speeches and toasts, Vivian commanding the room with effortless grace. Poirot, however, noticed a man lingering near the bara, wiry figure with a scar above his eyebrow, watching Vivian intently. Poirot whispered to Hastings, "Observe that man. He is no guest. See how his hand never strays far from his pocket." Before Hastings could respond, a scream pierced the air. The crowd parted, revealing a man slumped at a table, his face contorted. In agony, a glass of champagne lay shattered beside him. Chaos erupted as guests shrieked and staff rushed forward. Poirot knelt beside the victim, a middle-aged man with a gold watch and a familiar face, Sir Harold Grayson, a barrister known for defending high-profile criminals. "Poison," Poirot murmured, noting the faint almond-like scent on Grayson's lips. He scanned the table, a half-eaten canap, a napkin folded precisely, and a single ring-shaped cufflink glinting under the light. The symbol of 7 rings flashed in his mind. Vivian appeared, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, what's happened?" "Sir Harold was a friend." "Was he?" Poirot asked, his voice sharp. "Or was he an obstacle?" "Stay here, mademoiselle. The police will have questions." As Inspector Japp arrived, summoned by a quick-thinking porter, Poirot examined the scene. The cufflink was monogrammed with a V, and a quick search of Grayson's pocket revealed a note. "Trust Vivian. She knows the truth." Yet, when Poirot turned to question her, Vivian was gone, her emerald gown nowhere to be seen in the crowd. "Japp grumbled, slippery one, that actress. What's her game, Poirot? A game of mirrors, mon ami, Poirot replied. She wishes me to see one truth while hiding another. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. The investigation unfolded swiftly. Grayson's death was confirmed as cyanide poisoning, likely administered through the champagne. Witnesses recalled Vivian speaking to Grayson minutes before his collapse, but none saw her tamper with his drink. The scarred man at the bar had also vanished, leaving only a matchbook from a seedy East End club. Poirot, Hastings, and Japp returned to Poirot's flat, where Miss Lemon awaited with new findings. Vivian Carlyle's brother, Edward, was defended by Sir Harold Grayson. Miss Lemon reported. Grayson argued Edward was framed for the financier's murder, but evidence forged ledger sealed his conviction. I also found this. Madame Elise Fournier, Vivian's mentor, corresponded with Jane Wilkinson until her death. Fournier kept a diary, recently auctioned to an anonymous buyer. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The diary of Fournier may hold secrets of Wilkinson's methods. And this cufflink, with its V, it is too convenient. Vivian wishes us to believe she is a victim, but I suspect she is a puppeteer. Over the next 2 days, Poirot and Hastings pursued leads. The matchbook led to the Black Cat Club, a dimly lit haunt where the scarred man, identified as Tommy Rourke, was a known enforcer for hire. Rourke, when cornered by Japp's men, claimed he was paid to watch Vivian, but knew nothing of the murder. His employer, a voice on the phone, offering cash and a ring-shaped pendant as payment. Poirot, meanwhile, visited the theatre where Vivian performed. Her dressing room was a shrine to Jane Wilkinson. Photographs, playbills, even a replica of Wilkinson's sapphire necklace. A stagehand revealed Vivian's obsession with Wilkinson's life, saying she'd spent months researching her for a one-woman show. She called it her tribute, the stagehand said, but it felt personal. Back at the flat, Poirot pieced together the puzzle. Vivian Carlyle is no mere actress. She is a student of manipulation trained by Fournier, who herself was shaped by Wilkinson. The gala was a stage, Grayson's death a performance. But why? To free her brother, or to draw me into a trap? Hastings frowned. You think she's one of the 7 shadows? Perhaps, Poirot said, or she serves them. The cufflink, the note, they are clues meant to mislead. Grayson's death benefits someone, but not Vivian directly. We must find her. The search led to a dilapidated warehouse in Whitechapel, where Vivian had been spotted. Poirot, Hastings, and Japp approached cautiously, the night air thick with fog. Inside, they found Vivian, her emerald gown replaced by a plain coat, arguing with a man in a hooded cloak. The man fled at their approach, leaving a scrap of paper with the 7-ring symbol. Vivian, cornered, wept. I didn't kill Grayson. I swear it. I invited you to the gala because I thought you could save Edward. Someone's using me, Monsieur Poirot. They threatened my family. Poirot studied her, his gaze piercing. Who, mademoiselle? Who gave you the cufflink? Who wrote the note? She hesitated, then whispered, a man called number 2. He said he served a council. They know about your past, your cases. They want you ruined. Japp scoffed, but Poirot held up a hand. Number 2, a council. The pieces align. Mademoiselle, you will come with us. Your safety and your brother's depends on your truthfulness. At Scotland Yard, Vivian revealed fragments of the plot. Number 2 had approached her months ago, offering to free Edward if she lured Poirot to the gala. The cufflink was planted to implicate her, ensuring her silence. Grayson's death, she claimed, was unplanned, a warning from the council when she wavered. Poirot listened, but his mind raced. Vivian's tears were convincing, yet her story had gaps, like a script with missing pages. As Japp escorted Vivian to a safe house, Poirot confided in Hastings. She is a pawn, but a clever one. The council tests me, using my past to weave a web. Wilkinson's charm lives in Vivian, but the true mastermind remains hidden. We must find number 2 and the Diary of Fournier. The chapter closed with Poirot staring at the 7-ring symbol, its loops a taunting riddle. The gala's glamour had faded, replaced by a chilling certainty. The shadows were closing in, and Vivian Carlyle, whether victim or villain, was only the beginning. The investigation deepened over the following week, with Poirot's flat becoming a war room of clues and theories. Miss Lemon, ever the linchpin, tracked the auction of Madame Fournier's diary to a private collector in Mayfair, a reclusive woman named Lady Margaret Hen. Poirot and Hastings paid her a visit, finding her mansion a labyrinth of antiques and faded grandeur. Lady Henslow, frail but sharp, admitted to buying the diary for its theatrical history. Elise Fournier was a genius, she said, handing Poirot the leather-bound volume. But her secrets were dangerous. The diary was a goldmine. Fournier detailed her training of Jane Wilkinson, describing her as a chameleon, capable of love or betrayal in equal measure. More intriguing were references to a circle of 7, a group of influential figures who admired Wilkinson's cunning and sought to emulate her. Fournier had declined their invitation, but Wilkinson, ambitious and reckless, had joined them. The final entry, dated a year before Wilkinson's death, read, "Jane fears the circle. They demand loyalty beyond reason. I fear for her soul." Poirot's pulse quickened. The circle of 7, the council, they are one and the same. Wilkinson was their puppet, and now they use her legacy against me. Hastings, flipping through the diary, pointed to a sketch, 7 interlocking rings. "It's the same symbol, Poirot, but who are they, and why target you now?" "Because, mon ami, I am the one who exposed their kind." Wilkinson, Shepherd, Galvay were threads in a larger tapestry. The council seeks revenge, and Vivian is their latest instrument. Returning to London, Poirot learned Vivian had vanished from the safe house, leaving only a note, "Forgive me. I had no choice." Japp was furious, but Poirot remained. Calm she runs, but not far. The council controls her, but she is not their heart. We must find number 2. The trail led to the Black Cat Club, where a barman, bribed with a crisp pound note, revealed number 2's description. Tall, silver-haired, with a voice like ice. He'd met Vivian there days before the gala, passing her a package. Poirot, sensing the net tightening, instructed Japp to monitor the club while he and Hastings searched Vivian's apartment. The apartment, a chic flat in Kensington, was a treasure trove of deception. Hidden behind a mirror, Poirot found a locked box containing letters from number 2, each signed with the 7-ring symbol. The letters instructed Vivian to befriend Grayson, gain Poirot's trust, and ensure the gala's chaos. One line chilled Poirot: "The Belgian must fall, or the circle breaks." As they left, a shadow moved in the alley. Poirot spun, his cane raised, but the figure a boy delivering newspapers. On the ground lay a single ring-shaped pendant, identical to Rourke's payment. "They watch us," Poirot said, pocketing it. "But we are close." The next day, Miss Lemon uncovered a lead, a retired stagehand from Fournier's Theatre, now living in Brighton, claimed to know number two's identity. Poirot and Hastings boarded a train, the diary tucked safely in Poirot's coat. The stagehand, a grizzled man named Alfie, met them in a seaside pub. Number two's no myth, Alfie whispered. He's Sir Roderick Blake, a tycoon with a grudge. Fournier crossed him years ago, and he never forgave her. Or you, Mr. Poirot, for exposing his brother. Sir Roderick Blake. The name sent a jolt through Poirot. Blake's brother, a financier, had been ruined in a case Poirot solved in the 1920s, a scandal buried by time. If Blake was number two, the council's motive was personaler, vendetta spanning decades. As they returned to London, Poirot's mind raced. Vivian Grayson, the counsellor, were pawns in Blake's game. The gala was merely Act One, designed to entangle Poirot in a web of doubt and danger. But Poirot was no stranger to such games. Blake underestimates me, he told Hastings. He thinks the little grey cells will falter. He is wrong. The chapter's tension peaked as Poirot prepared for the next move. He sent Miss Lemon to dig into Blake's finances, while Jap tailed known associates. Hastings, ever loyal, vowed to stand by Poirot, though worry creased his brow. This council's playing for keeps, Poirot. What if Vivian's not the only trap? Then we spring them all, Poirot replied, his voice steel. The actress's charm has failed. Now we hunt the puppeteer. The narrative paused here, with Poirot standing at his window, the 7-ring pendant in his hand. The city sprawled before him, a chessboard of secrets. Vivian Carlyle, whether pawn or player, had vanished into its shadows, but Poirot knew she'd resurface. The council's game was far from over, and Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, was ready to play. Chapter 4. Death in the Skies. Hercule Poirot adjusted his tie. The crisp, not a small comfort against the unease that had settled in his chest. The invitation to the private plane journey had arrived 2 days prior, embossed with gold lettering, and signed by a certain Lord Reginald Ashford, a name Poirot vaguely recalled from society pages. The note had been polite, almost obsequious, requesting his presence on a short flight from London to Paris for a unique gathering of distinguished minds. Hastings, ever the skeptic, had warned against it, citing the cryptic letter about the 7 shadows still fresh in their minds. But Poirot, with his unyielding curiosity, could not resist. Mon ami, he had said, the little grey cells demand a challenge, and this, I suspect, is no mere social affair. The airfield was a windswept patch on the outskirts of London, the late autumn sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. A sleek, silver aeroplane gleamed under the dim lights of the hangar, its propellers still, awaiting its passengers. Poirot, clad in his finest wool overcoat, surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. A small group of individuals milled about, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. There was Lord Ashford himself, a tall man with a hawkish nose and a penchant for gesturing wildly as he spoke. Beside him stood a young woman, Miss Clara Beaumont, whose delicate features and nervous smile suggested she was unaccustomed to such opulent travel. Adored businessman, Mr. Ernest Hargrove, clutched a leather briefcase, his eyes darting suspiciously. Rounding out the party were Dr. Simon Vale, a dentist with a disarming grin, and Mrs. Evelyn Porter, a widow whose pearls and sharp tongue marked her as a woman of means. As Poirot boarded the plane, he noted the luxurious interior, plush leather, seats, polished wood panelling, and a small bar stocked with crystal decanters. The cabin was intimate, seating no more than 10, and the hum of the engines soon filled the air as the plane taxied onto the runway. Poirot settled into his seat, his cane resting against his knee, and observed his fellow passengers. Lord Ashford took the role of host, offering champagne and regaling the group with tales of his travels. Miss Beaumont fidgeted with her gloves, while Hargrove's grip on his briefcase tightened. Dr. Vale chatted amiably with Mrs. Porter, who responded with clipped politeness. Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unravelling human deceit, whispered that something was amiss. The flight began smoothly, the plane climbing into the grey sky. Poirot sipped his mineral water, declining the champagne, and allowed his mind to wander back to the cryptic letter. The symbol of 7 interlocking rings haunted him, a puzzle yet to be solved. Miss Lemon's research had yielded little too many enemies from his past, too many possibilities. The newspaper clipping about the King's Abbot murder, so reminiscent of Dr. Shepherd's cunning, had only deepened the mystery. Was this flight connected? The invitation had seemed innocuous, but Poirot knew better than to trust appearances. An hour into the journey, the plane hit a patch of turbulence, the cabin shuddering. Lord Ashford laughed it off, but Miss Beaumont gasped, clutching the armrest. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he noticed Dr. Vale slip something into his pocket, small metallic object that glinted briefly. The dentist's smile remained, but Poirot filed the observation away. Moments later, a piercing scream shattered the cabin's hum. Mrs. Porter stood, her face ashen, pointing at Mr. Hargrove. The businessman slumped in his seat, his briefcase fallen to the floor, his face contorted in a rictus of pain. Blood seeped from a small wound at the base of his neck, staining his collar. The cabin erupted in chaos. Miss Beaumont fainted, collapsing into her seat. Lord Ashford shouted for calm, while Dr. Vale rushed to Hargrove's side, checking for a pulse. "He's dead," Vale announced, his voice steady but his hands trembling. Poirot rose, his presence commanding silence. "Madame et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the panic, "please remain seated. We have a crime to unravel." He approached Hargrove's body, his eyes scanning every detail. The wound was precise, a single puncture, likely from a sharp instrument. No weapon was visible, but Poirot's gaze fell on the floor, where a tiny object lay half hidden beneath the seat. He knelt, careful not to touch it, and recognized it at once. A dental tool, its needle-like tip stained with blood. The passengers gasped as Poirot held up the tool, wrapped in his handkerchief. Dr. Vale paled, his earlier composure faltering. "That's not mine," he stammered. "I swear it." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "We shall see, Doctor. For now, no one moves." The plane's captain, alerted by the commotion, emerged from the cockpit. "We're over the channel," he said. "We can't land until Paris." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A murder in mid-air with no escape was a bold move. It reminded him of another case, years ago, Death in the Clouds, where a woman was killed with a poisoned dart on a flight. The method then had been subtle. The killer, a dentist named Norman Gale, whose charm had masked his cruelty. Could this be a coincidence? Poirot doubted it. He began his investigation, questioning each passenger. Lord Ashford claimed ignorance, insisting he had been chatting with Mrs. Porter at the time of the murder. Mrs. Porter corroborated this, though her eyes flicked nervously to her purse. Miss Beaumont, revived with smelling salts, admitted to seeing Dr. Vale near Hargrove's seat but could not be certain of his actions. Dr. Vale maintained his innocence, claiming the dental tool was planted. Poirot listened, his mind cataloguing inconsistencies. The briefcase, now open on the floor, revealed documents, financial records, contracts, and a single photograph of Hargrove with an unknown man. Poirot pocketed the photograph, intending to examine it later. He searched Hargrove's body, finding a crumpled note in his jacket. The second shadow falls. Poirot will follow. The symbol of 7 rings was scrawled beneath it. The passengers fell silent, their fear palpable. Poirot's thoughts turned to the Council of 7, the shadowy group hinted at in the cryptic letter. This murder, with its echoes of Norman Gale's methods, was no isolated act. It was a message, a challenge. But why Hargrove? And how had the killer struck so swiftly? Poirot examined the cabin, his eyes tracing every surface. The dental tool suggested precision, a weapon chosen for its concealability. He recalled Gale's use of a blowpipe in Death in the Clouds, a method that required proximity and skill. This killer, however, had used a direct stab, bold and risky. Poirot's gaze settled on the overhead luggage compartment above Hargrove's seat. With the captain's help, he opened it, revealing a small leather case. Inside was a second dental tool, identical to the first, and a vial of clear liquid poison. Poirot suspected. The discovery shifted suspicion back to Dr. Vale, who protested loudly. "I'm being framed," he cried. "Someone planted that case." Poirot remained impassive. "Perhaps, Doctor, but the little grey cells do not lie. We shall find the truth." As the plane began its descent into Paris, Poirot gathered the passengers in the centre of the cabin. "Madame et messieurs," he said, "a murderer is among us. Let us consider the facts. Mr. Hargrove was killed with a dental tool, a weapon linked to Dr. Vale's profession. Yet, the tool was found on the floor, not in the doctor's possession. A second tool and poison were hidden above the victim's seat, suggesting preparation. The note in Hargrove's pocket speaks of shadows and my own demise. This is no random crime, it is part of a larger design. He paced, his cane tapping rhythmically. Let us hypothesize. The killer needed access to Hargrove's seat, the opportunity to strike unseen, and a motive. Dr. Vale, you were seen near the victim. Your profession aligns with the weapon. But why kill so openly? Mrs. Porter, your purse contains a small mirror, angled to watch Hargrove's seat. Did you see something you did not share? Lord Ashford, your hospitality is generous, but your invitation brought me here. Why? Miss Beaumont, your nerves betray you. What do you fear? The passengers shifted uncomfortably. Poirot continued. The note suggests a connection to my past. A case, perhaps, where a dentist played a role. Norman Gale, a man I once unmasked, used his skills to kill. Is his shadow here, in the form of an accomplice? Dr. Vale's face hardened. You're grasping, Poirot. I'm no killer. But Poirot's eyes gleamed. We shall see. Captain, search the doctor's bag. The captain retrieved Vale's medical bag, revealing a third dental tool. This one clean. Poirot's suspicions deepened. 3 tools, doctor. Most curious. Vale's protests grew weaker, but Poirot sensed he was not the mastermind. The Council of 7 operated with precision, and this murder was too theatrical, too personal. As the plane landed in Paris, Poirot contacted Inspector Japp, who was waiting at the airfield with French police. The passengers were detained, and Poirot shared his findings. "Jap, mon ami," he said, "this is no simple murder. The killer is an accomplice of Norman Gale, hired by the Council of Seven. The dental tools, the note, they are meant to taunt me. But there is more. The photograph in Hargrove's briefcase. Recognize the man beside him. He is Victor Crane, a known associate of Gale's, believed dead. He is alive, and he is here." Jap's men searched the airfield, but Crane was gone. Poirot examined the murder weapon again, noting the symbol of 7 rings etched faintly. "On its handle, they mock me," he murmured. But Hercule Poirot does not falter. The investigation continued in Paris, with Poirot and Jap interrogating the passengers. Miss Beaumont broke down, admitting she had been paid to distract Poirot with her nervous act. Mrs. Porter confessed to seeing Vale near Hargrove, but had been too frightened to speak. Lord Ashford's invitation, it seemed, had been orchestrated by an anonymous benefactor, likely Crane. Dr. Vale, under pressure, admitted to knowing Crane, but swore he had not killed Hargrove. "He approached me months ago," Vale said. "He had a job, but I refused. I swear it." Poirot pieced together the plot. Crane, acting for the council, had hired Vale to plant suspicion, knowing Poirot would recognize the dental tool's significance. The real killer was Crane himself, using the turbulence to slip beside Hargrove and strike. The poison vial was a backup, unused but meant to confuse. The theatricality was Crane's signature, a nod to Gale's flair, as Jap's men closed in. On Crane's last known location, Poirot returned to his hotel, the weight of the case heavy on him. Hastings, who had joined him in Paris, was grim. "They're targeting you, Poirot. This council, they won't stop." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "Oui, mon ami. But nor will I. The little grey cells are at war, and I shall prevail." The chapter closed with Poirot staring at the photograph of Crane, the symbol of 7 rings burning in his mind. The second shadow had fallen, but 5 remained. The game was far from over, and Poirot knew the skies would not be the last battlefield. The plane's interior was a study in contrasts. Opulence marred by the stark reality of death. Poirot's mind churned as he replayed the moments before Hargrove's murder. The turbulence had been brief but violent, enough to distract most passengers. Crane, if he was indeed the killer, had chosen his moment well. But how had he boarded undetected? The passenger list was small, carefully curated. Poirot's thoughts turned to the crewer, stewardess, the captain, and a co-pilot. Could one of them be complicit? He approached the stewardess, a young woman named Marie, whose composure had held despite the chaos. "Mademoiselle," he said, "tell me of the preparations for this flight. Who handled the passenger list?" Marie hesitated, then admitted that Lord Ashford had provided the names. But a last-minute addition Dr. Vale had come via a telegram. Poirot's mustache twitched. "A telegram, you say? Most interesting." Back at the airfield, Jap's search yielded a breakthrough. A discarded coat, found in a hangar, bore Crane's initials and a ticket stub for a Paris-bound train. "He's on the move," Jap said, "but we'll catch him." Poirot was less optimistic. Crane's escape was too clean, too planned. The Council of Seven was not a group of amateurs. They were chess masters, and Poirot was their opponent. In the hotel, Poirot spread Hargrove's documents across a table. The financial records detailed transactions with a shell company, one Miss Lemon could trace. The contracts hinted at Hargrove's involvement in a shady deal, possibly the motive for his murder. But it was the photograph that held Poirot's attention. Crane's face, lean and sharp, stared back, a ghost from a case Poirot thought buried. Norman Gale's accomplice, presumed dead after a prison escape, had resurfaced to haunt him. Hastings, pouring tea, broke the silence. "What's their game, Poirot? Why these elaborate murders?" Poirot sipped his tea, the warmth steadying him. "It is a vendetta, mon ami. The council seeks not just my death, but my disgrace. Each murder is a mirror, reflecting a case where I triumphed. They wish to prove I am fallible, to break me before the final blow." The night stretched on, Poirot's mind relentless. He wrote to Miss Lemon, requesting a deeper dive into Crane's history and any links to the council. The symbol of 7 rings, he suspected, was more than a signature writ, was a key. As dawn broke over Paris, Poirot stood at his window, the city's lights fading. The second shadow had tested him, but he was ready for the third. The little grey cells, as always, would lead the way. Poirot's investigation took him to the heart of Paris, where he met with Inspector Giraud, a French colleague with whom he shared a prickly respect. Giraud, skeptical of Poirot's theories, agreed to assist, provided Poirot shared credit. "The French police do not chase shadows, Monsieur Poirot," Giraud said. Poirot smiled thinly. "Then let us catch a ghost, Inspector, there first." Stop was the train station, where Crane's ticket stub suggested a destination. Lyon, Japp's men had alerted local authorities, but Poirot doubted Crane would be so careless. Instead, he focused on the shell company in Hargrove's documents. A visit to a Parisian bank revealed its owner, a holding firm linked to a London address. Poirot cabled Miss Lemon, who confirmed the address belonged to a defunct law firm. Once tied to Norman Gale's family, the pieces were aligning, but Poirot needed more. He returned to the passengers, now housed in a Paris hotel under guard. Dr. Vale, isolated from the others, was Poirot's first target. "Doctor," Poirot said, "you knew Crane. Tell me everything, or Japp will not be so lenient." Vale, worn down, confessed that Crane had approached him a year ago, offering money to join a project. Vale had declined but kept Crane's contact-to-burner phone number. Poirot traced the number, but it was dead. Still, Vale's story confirmed Crane's role as the council's operative. The other passengers offered little. Lord Ashford was evasive, Mrs. Porter indignant, and Miss Beaumont tearful. Poirot sensed they were pawns, manipulated by a greater force. The council's reach was vast, its motives personal. As days passed, Poirot's frustration grew. Crane remained elusive, and the council's next move was unclear. Japp, under pressure from London, urged Poirot to return. "We've got Vale in custody, and the others are cooperating. Let's regroup." But Poirot refused. "The game is here, Japp. Crane is close. I feel it." His intuition proved correct. A tip from Giraud led them to a warehouse in Paris's industrial district where Crane had been spotted. Poirot, Japp, and Giraud raided the site, finding a cache of dental tools, forged documents, and a map marked with 7 locations tied to a Poirot case. Crane, however, was gone, leaving a taunting note. 3 shadows await Poirot. The skies were only the beginning. Poirot's resolve hardened. The warehouse confirmed the council's scope, a network of operatives, each inspired by his past foes. The map suggested future targets, but Poirot kept it secret, sharing only with Hastings. "We must anticipate, mon ami," he said. "The council plays for my soul, but I play for justice. The chapter's final act unfolded in a quiet Paris café, where Poirot met an old informant, Madame Dubois. She had heard whispers of the council, a group formed by a man of wealth and vengeance, driven by a grudge against Poirot. Her description matched no one Poirot knew, but her warning was clear. They will strike where you are weakest, monsieur. Guard your heart. Poirot returned to his hotel, the weight of Madame Dubois's words heavy. Hastings, ever loyal, offered reassurance. We'll beat them, Poirot, together. Poirot smiled, but his eyes were distant. The second shadow had fallen, but the war was far from won. The Council of Seven was closing in, and Poirot's greatest test lay ahead. The days in Paris blurred into a relentless pursuit. Poirot's mornings began with cables from Miss Lemon, her efficiency a lifeline. She had traced the shell company to a network of accounts, each tied to a different city. The London address was a dead end, but a second clue emerged. A safe deposit box in Lyon, rented under Crane's alias. Poirot and Japp travelled south, Giraud trailing reluctantly. The Lyon Bank was a fortress of marble and steel. The manager, persuaded by Poirot's charm and Japp's badge, opened the box. Inside were letters, each signed with the 7-ring symbol. They detailed the council's plans, 6 operatives, each inspired by a Poirot case, led by a 7th unnamed figure. Hargrove's murder was the second act, following the King's Abbot killing. The letters named no targets, but hinted at a final spectacle to break the detective's spirit. Poirot's heart sank. The council's ambition was staggering, their hatred personal. He pocketed the letters, sharing only fragments with Japp. "We must be cautious, mon ami," he said. "The council has eyes everywhere." Japp nodded, but his frustration was evident. "We're chasing ghosts, Poirot. Give me something solid." The solid came unexpectedly. A Lyon informant, paid by Giraud, reported seeing Crane at a local club, meeting a man matching Lord Ashford's description. Poirot's suspicions of Ashford deepened. Had the Lord's invitation been a trap from the start? He confronted Ashford in Paris, now under loose surveillance. "Monsieur," said, "your role in this flight was no coincidence. Speak, or face the consequences." Ashford crumbled, admitting he had been coerced by an anonymous figure to invite Poirot. "They threatened my family," he said. "I had no choice." Poirot believed him, but pressed for details. Ashford's description of the figure was vague, but a detail stood out: a ring with 7 interlocking bands. The mastermind, the 7th shadow, was closer than Poirot had thought. The chase led back to London, where Poirot hoped to regroup. Crane's trail had gone cold, but the letters from Lyon offered new leads. Miss Lemon's research linked the council to a series of unsolved crimes, each mirroring Poirot's cases. The ABC murders, death on the Nile, peril at End Housel, were echoed in recent killings, each with the 7-ring symbol. Poirot's flat became a war room, papers strewn across his desk. Hastings, Miss Lemon, and Japp worked tirelessly, each driven by loyalty to Poirot. The detective himself was tireless, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The council's goal was clear: to unravel his legacy, to prove him mortal, but was not ready to fall. As Chapter 4 drew to a close, Poirot stood alone in his study, the photograph of Crane in hand. The second shadow had tested his resolve, but he had emerged stronger. The Council of Seven was a formidable foe, but Hercule Poirot was no ordinary man. The skies had been a battlefield, but the war was far from over. With his little grey cells as his weapon, Poirot prepared for the next shadow, knowing the game had only begun. Chapter 5. The ABC Puzzle. The morning air in Poirot's London flat carried a faint chill, the kind that crept through the cracks of even the most meticulously maintained windows. Hercule Poirot sat at his mahogany desk, his small, precise hands folded over a pile of letters. Each was typed in a crisp, mechanical font, the paper crisp and unblemished save for the bold, taunting signature, ABC. The letters had arrived over the past week, each announcing a murder in a different town, each town's name progressing alphabetically: Andover, Bexhill, Churston. The audacity of the scheme was unmistakable, a deliberate echo of the ABC murders that had once pushed Poirot to the brink of exhaustion. But this was no mere copycat. This was a calculated challenge, a gauntlet thrown by the mysterious Council of Seven, whose symbol of interlocking rings had haunted Poirot since the cryptic letter that began this ordeal. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, paced the room, his brow furrowed. "It's monstrous, Poirot," he said, his voice tight with indignation. "These letters, they're mocking you, dragging up that wretched case, and the police are no closer to catching this fiend than they were a week ago." Poirot's eyes, sharp and green as polished jade, flicked up from the letters. "Mockery, mon ami, is the weapon of the insecure. This ABC does not merely wish to kill. He wishes to prove himself superior to Hercule Poirot, and that Hastings is his fatal flaw." He tapped the topmost letter with a manicured finger. "Observe the precision of the typewriter, the exact spacing of the words. This is not the work of a madman, but of a mind that craves order, and order, my friend, can be unravelled." Miss Lemon, Poirot's unflappable secretary, entered with a tray of tea, her expression as composed as ever. "Inspector Japp telephoned Mr. Poirot," she said, setting the tray down. "He's in Brighton now, following the Churston murder. He says the local police found a railway guide next to the victim, just like the others. He's expecting you this afternoon." "Brighton," Poirot mused, leaning back in his chair. The letter for Churston promised a death, and a death was delivered. Now we must anticipate the next Doncaster, perhaps, or Dover. The alphabet is a predictable master. He rose, smoothing his immaculate suit. "Come, Hastings. We shall meet Japp in Brighton and see what the little grey cells can uncover." The train to Brighton was a sleek affair, its compartments filled with the chatter of holiday-makers, oblivious to the grim purpose of Poirot's journey. Hastings, seated opposite, fidgeted with his newspaper. "Do you think this is really the Council of Seven, Poirot, or just one of their pawns, like the others?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of deep thought. "The Council, Hastings, is a hydra. Cut off one head, and another grows. This ABC is a servant, I think, but a clever one. The true mastermind, the number one, remains in the shadows. But each move they make reveals a little more of their design." Brighton greeted them with a salty breeze and the distant cries of gulls. The town was alive with summer visitors, their laughter a stark contrast to the sombre scene awaiting Poirot and Hastings at the police station. Inspector Japp, his face lined with fatigue, met them at the entrance. "Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes," he said, clapping a hand on Poirot's shoulder. "This case is a nightmare. 3 murders, each one clean as a whistle, and those blasted letters taunting us every step of the way. Show me the scene, mon cher Japp." Poirot said, his tone calm but commanding. "The devil is in the details. The victim A retired schoolteacher named Clara Henshaw had been found in her modest cottage on the outskirts of Churston. The cause of death was a single, precise stab wound to the heart, delivered with surgical precision. Beside her body lay an ABC railway guide, open to the page for Churston. Poirot knelt beside the guide, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of the page. "Curious," he murmured. "The guide is pristine, yet the room shows signs of a struggle. Why leave such an obvious clue untouched?" Japp shrugged. "To taunt us, I reckon. Just like the letters." No, Poirot said, rising. "The letters taunt, yes, but the guide serves another purpose. It is a signature, but also a distraction. The killer wishes us to focus on the alphabet, to chase the pattern. But the true clue lies elsewhere." His eyes scanned the room, lingering on a small, overturned table. Beneath it, half hidden by a rug, was a single cufflink, engraved with the letter S, a clue. Hastings exclaimed, reaching for it. Poirot raised a hand. "Careful, Hastings. This, too, may be a plant, but it is a clue nonetheless. S for whom shepherd, someone new. We must proceed with caution." Back at the station, Japp shared the details of the previous murders. In Andover, an elderly shopkeeper, Alice Asher, had been bludgeoned in her tobacco shop, an ABC guide left on the counter. In Bexhill, a young waitress, Betty Barnard, was strangled on the beach, the guide tucked into her handbag. Each crime was meticulous, the victims seemingly unconnected save for the alphabetical progression of their towns. The letters, mailed to Poirot's flat, gloated over each success, promising more to come. "The press is having a field day," Japp grumbled, tossing a newspaper onto the desk. The headline screamed, "ABC Killer Strikes Again. Is Poirot past his prime?" "They're saying, you're losing your touch, Poirot." Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "Let them talk, Japp. The little grey cells are never out of season, but we must act swiftly. The next letter will name the next town, and we cannot allow another death." That evening, as Poirot and Hastings dined at a seaside hotel, a waiter delivered a sealed envelope. Poirot opened it with care, revealing another typed letter. "Dear M. Poirot, Churston was a delight, was it not? Clara Henshaw played her part so well, unwittingly, of course. Shall we continue our game? Look to Doncaster, where the next act awaits. The alphabet marches on, and you, I fear, are falling behind. Yours, ABC, Doncaster." Hastings said, his voice grim. "We've got to get there before the killer strikes." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant. "The letter is too confident, Hastings. It assumes we will follow blindly, but I suspect a trap. The killer expects us in Doncaster, but perhaps the true strike will be elsewhere. We must think beyond the alphabet." The journey to Doncaster was tense, the weight of the case pressing on all three men. Japp had rallied a team of local police, and the station was abuzz with activity when they arrived. Poirot, however, insisted on visiting the town's library, where he requested old copies of the ABC Railway Guide. "The killer is obsessed with this guide," he explained to a puzzled Hastings. "But why? It is not merely a prop. It holds a secret." Hours of scrutiny revealed nothing until Poirot noticed a faint pencil mark on one guide's index, circled letter D, Doncaster. He murmured, "But also Dover." He turned. "To Japp, we have been misled. The killer may strike in Dover, not Doncaster. Send men to both, but I will go to Dover myself." Japp protested, but Poirot's resolve was unshakable. The Council of Seven plays a game of misdirection. Jap. They revive the ABC murders to exhaust me, to make me doubt my own mind. But I am Hercule Poirot, and I will not be outwitted. Dover's cliffs loomed under a stormy sky as Poirot and Hastings arrived. The local police, skeptical but cooperative, had been briefed on the ABC pattern. Poirot's instincts led him to a quiet boarding house near the docks, where a guest had recently arrived, nervous, bespectacled man named Arthur Cust. The name sent a chill through Poirot, for Cust had been the innocent pawn in the original ABC case, manipulated by the true killer. Is it really him? Hastings whispered as they watched Cust from across the street. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No, Hastings, this is not Cust. This is an imposter, playing the role to perfection. The council has studied my case as well. They followed Cust to a dimly lit pub, where he met a woman in a dark coat. Poirot, disguised in a plain overcoat and cap, slipped inside, his ears attuned to their hushed conversation. The woman handed Cust a parcel, whispering, "Dover's the place. Make it quick, and don't forget the guide." Poirot signaled to Hastings, who alerted the police. As Cust left the pub, officers surrounded him, but the woman slipped away into the night. The parcel contained a knife and an ABC guide, marked for Dover. Cust, trembling, insisted he was only following orders from a man in London who paid him to deliver the parcel. "He's a pawn, just like before," Poirot said, his voice heavy with frustration. "The real killer is still out there, and the woman is our link to the council." The police interrogated Cust, who revealed little beyond his desperation for money, but a search of his room uncovered a typed note, identical in style to the ABC letters, instructing him to act confused if caught. Poirot's suspicions were confirmed. The council was orchestrating a performance, with Cust as the unwitting star. As dawn broke over Dover, Poirot received another letter, this one hand-delivered to the police station. "Dear M. Poirot, Dover was..." A clever guess, but too late. The game continues, and the alphabet is unforgiving. Look to Exeter next. Or perhaps you are tiring. The council watches, and we are not impressed. Yours, ABC Hastings, slammed the letter down. "They're toying with us, Poirot. How do we stop this?" Poirot's face was a mask of determination. "We stop it, Hastings, by understanding the mind behind it. This ABC is not the mastermind, but a servant of the council. The letters, the guides, the alphabetical towns, they are a distraction from the true purpose, to break me. But I am not broken." Back in London, Poirot convened with Miss Lemon, who had been cross-referencing his old case files. "I've found something, Mr. Poirot," she said, producing a dossier. The original ABC case involved a man named Franklin Clark, who manipulated Cust. Clark died in prison, but he had a brother, Sir Carmichael Clark, who was never implicated. Sir Carmichael's estate is in Sussex, not far from Brighton. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A brother seeking vengeance for a brother's disgrace. It is possible we must investigate Sir Carmichael, but discreetly. The council will be watching. The estate in Sussex was a sprawling manor, its gardens overgrown and its windows dark. Poirot and Hastings, posing as historians researching local architecture, gained entry. The housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Grayson, was reluctant to speak. Of Sir Carmichael, who had become reclusive since his brother's death. But Poirot's charm coaxed a clue. Sir Carmichael had recently hosted a literary society meeting, attended by 6 strangers. The council, Hastings whispered as they left the manor. "It has to be them." Poirot nodded. 6 allies, led by a 7th. Sir Carmichael may be our number 1 or another pawn. We must tread carefully, for the next murder is imminent. The trail led to Exeter, where Poirot anticipated the next strike. The police were on high alert, patrolling the town's quieter streets. Poirot, however, focused on the railway station, where he believed the killer would leave the ABC guide. His hunch proved correct. A young woman, matching the description of the woman from Dover, was spotted leaving a guide on a bench. Poirot and Hastings pursued her, but she vanished into a crowd. The guide was open to Exeter, but no body was found. "A feint," Poirot said, his voice tight. "The killer wanted us to find the guide, to keep us chasing shadows. The real strike will be elsewhere." His prediction was confirmed that night, when news broke of a murder in Folkestone. A grocer named Edward Ferris, stabbed in his shop, an ABC guide beside him. The letter arrived the next morning, gloating over Poirot's failure. "Dear M. Poirot, Exeter was a merry chase, but Folkestone was the prize. Poor Edward Ferris never saw it coming. Shall we try Gloucester next? The council grows impatient, and your time is running out. Yours, ABC." Poirot's face was grim as he read the letter. "The council underestimates me, Hastings. They think to exhaust me, to make me doubt. But each mistake they make brings me closer to their heart." The investigation intensified. Poirot, Japp, and Hastings worked tirelessly, following leads. From Folkestone to Gloucester. In Gloucester, Poirot's vigilance paid off. He spotted a man loitering near a bookshop, his coat pocket bulging with what Poirot suspected was a railway guide. The man, identified as Thomas Reed, was arrested. Before he could act, Reed confessed to being hired by the same man in London as Cust, but knew little else. Poirot's frustration grew, but his resolve did not waver. "The council is clever," he told Hastings, "but they are not infallible. Each pawn they sacrifice reveals a piece of the puzzle. We are close, mon ami, so very close." The breakthrough came from Miss Lemon, who uncovered a financial trail linking Sir Carmichael's estate to a London bank account. The account funded the literary society meetings, and one name stood out: Roderick Blake, a reclusive tycoon with ties to Poirot's past cases. Poirot's memory stirred. Blake's brother had been exposed in a fraud case years ago, a case Poirot had solved. "Blake," Poirot said, his voice low. "He is the shadow behind the council. Sir Carmichael is his puppet, and the ABC killer is his weapon. We must find him before Gloucester becomes another tragedy." The race to Gloucester was a test of endurance. Poirot, though visibly tired, refused to rest. "The little grey cells must not falter," he said, his eyes burning with determination. At the Gloucester railway station, Poirot orchestrated a trap, using police decoys to lure the killer. The woman from Dover reappeared, but this time Poirot was ready. She was apprehended, revealing her name, Margaret Lane, a former actress. Trained by Jane Wilkinson's mentor, Lane's interrogation cracked the case wide open. She admitted to being hired by Sir Carmichael, who answered to a Mr. Blake. The ABC murders were designed to exhaust Poirot, to make him question his own brilliance. But Lane knew little of Blake's plans, only that he was planning a final act in London. Poirot returned to London, his mind racing. The ABC puzzle was nearly solved, but the council's endgame loomed. "We have stopped the pawn, Hastings," he said, "but the king remains. Blake will not rest until I am destroyed." The chapter closed with Poirot at his desk, the ABC letters spread before him. The symbol of 7 rings, etched on each envelope, seemed to pulse with menace. But Poirot's face was calm, his mind a fortress. "The council believes they have me cornered," he said softly. "But they forget one thing. Hercule Poirot never surrenders." Chapter 6. Niall's Revenge. Hercule Poirot sat at his polished mahogany desk in his London flat, the late afternoon sun casting golden streaks through the heavy drapes. His fingers, delicate yet precise, traced the edges of an embossed invitation. Its cream parchment, adorned with an elegant Nile, motif papyrus reeds, and a golden ankh. The invitation, addressed to him personally, requested his presence on a luxurious, Nile-themed cruise departing from Cairo in 3 days' time. The host, a certain Madame Amira Khalil, promised an evening of unforgettable splendor aboard a private steamer. The Nefertiti's glory, a handwritten note, accompanied it. In flowing script, "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. Join us to unravel a mystery of the heart." Hastings, sprawled in an armchair with a cup of tea, glanced up from his newspaper. "Sounds like a trap, old chap. Cairo, of all places. And this mystery of the heart business reeks of theatrics." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Theatrics, mon ami, are often the cloak of truth. This invitation, it is no coincidence. The symbol of 7 rings I have not forgotten, lingers in my mind. My foes from my past have struck, or so the message from King's Abbot claimed. This cruise, it may hold the next." Miss Lemon, ever efficient, entered with a stack of files. "I've cross-referenced your cases, Mr. Poirot, as you asked. The Nile connection points to death on the Nile. Jacqueline de Belafort and Simon Doyle are both deceased, but Jacqueline had a cousin, Elise de Belafort, who inherited her estate. Elise was in Cairo last year, according to shipping records." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Elise de Belafort, a name that stirs the little grey cells. If she harbours resentment for her cousin's fate, she may seek to avenge her. "Hastings, pack your lightest suit. We depart for Cairo tomorrow." The journey to Cairo was a blur of bustling ports and stifling heat, but Poirot remained immaculate. His Panama hat tilted just so. The Nefertiti's glory awaited them at a private dock, its sleek white hull gleaming under the Egyptian sun. The steamer was a marvel teak decks, brass railings, and a dining saloon adorned with lotus chandelier. Guests, a mix of wealthy expatriates and local elites, milled about, their chatter punctuated by the clink of champagne flutes. Madame Amira Khalil greeted Poirot at the gangway, her presence commanding. She was tall, with coal-lined eyes and a silk caftan that shimmered like the river itself. "Monsieur Poirot, what an honor," she purred, her accent a blend of French and Arabic. "Your fame has reached even the sands of Egypt." Poirot bowed, his gaze sharp. "Madame, the honor is mine. But tell me, what is this mystery you speak of?" She laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Patience, monsieur. All will be revealed tonight, under the stars." Hastings muttered to Poirot as they boarded, "She's too charming. Reminds me of Jane Wilkinson, all smiles and schemes." "Precisement," Poirot whispered. "The charm, it is a mask. We must watch her closely." The cruise began at dusk, the steamer gliding smoothly along the Nile's glassy surface. Lanterns cast a warm glow, and a string quartet played softly. Poirot, in his white dinner jacket, mingled with the guests, his ears attuned to every snippet of conversation. Hastings, less discreet, hovered near the buffet, eyeing a young woman in a green dress who seemed oddly familiar. "That's Elise de Belfort," Hastings whispered, joining Poirot on the deck. "I saw her photograph in Miss Lemon's file. She's here, and she's watching you." Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to Elise, who stood near the railing, her dark hair catching the moonlight. She was younger than Jacqueline had been, but the resemblance was striking, the same sharp jaw, the same intensity in her eyes. She caught Poirot's stare and raised her glass in a subtle toast before turning away. The evening's entertainment began in the saloon, where Madame had announced a game of secrets. Each guest would receive an envelope containing a fictional crime to solve, with clues scattered across the ship. Poirot's envelope, however, was different. Inside was a single card, inscribed with the 7-ring symbol and the words, "The past flows like the Nile, monsieur. Can you stop its tide?" Hastings frowned. "This is no game, Poirot. They're baiting you." "We and I shall take the bait," Poirot replied, his voice low, "but on my terms." The first clue led Poirot to the ship's library, a cosy room lined with leather-bound books. There, tucked inside a volume of the Odyssey, he found a photograph of Jacqueline de Belfort, her face crossed out in red ink. A note was pinned to it. "She trusted you, and you betrayed her." Poirot's mind raced. Jacqueline's death had been her own doing, a tragic end to her obsession with Simon Doyle. Yet Elise, it seemed, blamed him for exposing her cousin's crimes. As Poirot examined the note, a scream pierced the night. He and Hastings rushed to the deck, where guests crowded around a crumpled figure. A man, one of the expatriates, lay dead, a jeweled dagger protruding from his chest, blood pooled beneath him, stark against the polished wood. Madame Khalil, pale but composed, ordered the crew to secure the scene. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands careful. The dagger's hilt bore the 7-ring symbol, and a scrap of paper was clutched in the victim's hand. It read, "The first tribute to the Nile." Hastings gasped. "It's death on the Nile all over again. The dagger, the staging, it's Jacqueline's style." "Not Jacqueline," Poirot corrected. "Elise. She recreates her cousin's methods to torment me." The ship's captain, a stern man named Hassan, demanded answers. "Monsieur, you are the detective. Who did this?" Poirot rose, his expression grave. "The killer is among us, Captain, but I require time and access to the ship's records. Every guest, every crew member, must be accounted for." Hassan hesitated, then nodded. "You have until we reach Luxor tomorrow night. After that, I call the authorities." Poirot and Hastings spent the night investigating their cabin, a makeshift command center. Poirot pored over the guest list, noting discrepancies. Elise de Belfort had boarded under an alias, Mademoiselle Claire Dupont, but her handwriting matched the note in Poirot's envelope. Madame Halil's background was murkier. Her wealth came from a shipping empire, but her connection to Elise was unclear. At dawn, Poirot interviewed the crew, focusing on a nervous steward named Karim. Under pressure, Karim admitted to delivering a package to Elise's cabin, a locked box, contents unknown. Poirot ordered the box retrieved, but it was empty, its lock broken. Inside, a faint scent of bitter almonds lingered. "Cyanide," Poirot murmured. "A weapon of precision, like Jacqueline's revolver." Elise plans another strike. The day passed in a haze of suspicion. Guests whispered, eyeing each other warily. Elise, now openly acknowledging her identity, approached Poirot at lunch. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but edged, "you destroyed my cousin. She loved Simon, and you took her life." Poirot met her gaze. Mademoiselle Jacqueline's choices were her own. I exposed the truth, nothing more. Elisa's smile was cold. "Truth is a river, monsieur. It drowns those who swim against it." She walked away, leaving Poirot unsettled. That afternoon, a second crime unfolded. A priceless emerald necklace, displayed in the saloon as part of the game, vanished from its case. A note, left in its place, accused Poirot of the theft, claiming he'd been seen near the case. The guests, already on edge, turned hostile. One, a British colonel, demanded Poirot's arrest. "It's a frame," Hastings protested. "Poirot, they're trying to ruin you." Poirot remained calm. "We and they underestimate me. The necklace is still on this ship. We must find it, and the true thief." Poirot's search led to the engine room, where he found a hidden compartment containing the necklace, wrapped in a scarf bearing Elisa's initials. But as he emerged, a gunshot rang out, grazing his shoulder. The shooter, a masked figure, fled into the ship's maze of corridors. Hastings, hearing the shot, found Poirot and helped him to safety. "Elisa's work," Poirot said, wincing as Hastings bandaged his wound. "She combines theft and violence to discredit me. But why the necklace? It is a distraction, Nan." The answer came at dinner, when Madame Khalil announced a surprise, a mock trial to solve the theft and murder. The guests, eager for drama, agreed to participate. Elise, playing prosecutor, accused Poirot of both crimes, presenting forged witness statements and a planted fingerprint. The mood grew ugly, with some guests calling for Poirot's confinement. Poirot, rising despite his injury, took the floor. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice steady, "you are being deceived. The true criminal is not I, but one who manipulates you with lies." He produced the necklace, explaining its discovery, and revealed the scarf's initials. Gasps filled the room as Elisa's composure faltered. But Elise was quick. "A clever trick, monsieur, but you planted that scarf to frame me." The standoff was interrupted by a new crisis. The ship's engines sputtered, and a crewman shouted that the fuel lines had been sabotaged. As panic spread, Poirot whispered to Hastings, "This is her endgame. She means to strand us, or worse." With the ship drifting toward Luxor, Poirot worked swiftly. He and Hastings searched Elisa's cabin, finding a journal detailing her plan to recreate death on the Nile's chaos, frame Poirot, and escape in the confusion. The journal mentioned a council confirming Poirot's fears of a larger conspiracy. A hidden vial of cyanide, tucked in a jewelry box, hinted at her next move. Poirot confronted Elise on the deck, the Nile's dark waters reflecting the tension. "Mademoiselle, your game is over. The necklace, the murder, the sabotage all point to you." Elise laughed, her eyes wild. "You're too late, Poirot. The council will finish what I started. 5 have struck to remain." She lunged, a syringe in hand, but Hastings tackled her, pinning her to the deck. The syringe, filled with cyanide, rolled into the river. Madame Khalil, revealed as Elisa's reluctant ally, confessed under Poirot's questioning. She'd been blackmailed by the council to host the cruise, unaware of Elisa's full plan. The dagger, the necklace, the forged evidence, all were Elisa's doing, orchestrated to mirror Jacqueline's methods. As the ship limped into Luxor, the authorities boarded, arresting Elise. She spat at Poirot as she was led away. "The 7 will bury you, Poirot." You can't stop them. Poirot, exhausted but resolute, watched her go. None, mademoiselle. The little grey cells, they do not rest. Back in Cairo, Poirot and Hastings prepared to return to London. The wound in Poirot's shoulder was minor, but Hastings noticed a weariness in his friend's eyes. "Sit down, Poirot," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "One to go, you'll outwit them yet." Poirot gazed at the Nile, its surface calm but hiding depths unseen. "The seventh, Hastings, is the true danger. Elise was a pawn like the others. The mastermind, Le Cerveau, awaits us." He folded the invitation, its 7-ring symbol now a familiar taunt, and tucked it into his pocket. "To London, mon ami. The war, it is not yet won." Chapter 7. The Peril Returns. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of London, wrapping the city in a damp, grey shroud. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the chill, stood at the window of his flat, his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, undimmed by the years, scanned the street below, though his mind was elsewhere. The cryptic letter, the murders echoing his past cases. The symbol of 7 interlocking rings. They formed a puzzle that gnawed at his little grey cells. 6 enemies had struck, each drawing from a case that had once tested his brilliance. Dr. Shepherd, Jane Wilkinson, Norman Gale, the ABC killer, Jacqueline de Belafort, and now a new threat loomed. The Council of 7, as he had begun to call them, was closing in, and Poirot felt the weight of their vendetta. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated by the fire with a cup of tea, broke the silence. "Poirot, you've been staring out that window. For ages. What's on your mind? Not that I need to ask, it's this blasted conspiracy, isn't it?" Poirot turned, his moustache twitching slightly. "Mon ami, it is not merely a conspiracy. It is a symphony of vengeance, each note played by a hand from my past. But the conductor remains hidden, and that Hastings is what troubles me." Miss Felicity Lemon, Poirot's ever-efficient secretary, entered with a stack of files. Her face, usually a model of composure, betrayed a flicker of concern. "Monsieur Poirot, I've cross-referenced your case records, as you asked. The patterns are unmistakable. Each attack mirrors a case where your triumph left someone family, friend or follower imtarred. But I've found something else." She handed him a letter, its envelope bearing the now familiar symbol of 7 rings. Poirot opened it with care, his gloved fingers precise. The message was brief. "The peril returns. Monsieur Poirot, end house awaits. Trust no one." Below the words was a crude sketch of a cliffside manor, unmistakably reminiscent of End House, the setting of a case years ago where a young woman, Nick Buckley, had narrowly escaped death through Poirot's intervention. End House Poirot murmured, "Peril at End House." The case of Mademoiselle Nick, who played a dangerous game with her own life. But why now? Nick is long gone, her troubles resolved. Who revives this shadow? Hastings set down his tea. "Sounds like another trap, Poirot. You're not thinking of going, are you? After Cairo, Brighton, and that business on the plane, you're walking into their hands." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "If it is a trap, mon ami, then it is one I must spring. To catch the hunter, one must understand his bait. Miss Lemon, what do we know of End House today?" Miss Lemon adjusted her glasses. "The property was sold after Miss Buckley's time. It's now owned by Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a widow of some means. I found a newspaper article from last week's She's. hosting a charity auction there tomorrow night. You're listed as an invited guest. Poirot raised an eyebrow. An invitation I did not receive. Most curious. Mrs. Vance, you say. What do we know of her? Little, I'm afraid, Miss Lemon replied. She's kept a low profile since her husband's death 5 years ago. But there's a connection. Her maiden name is Buckley. She's a distant cousin of Nick Buckley. Poirot's moustache quivered. A cousin, the thread tightens. Hastings, we depart for End House at once. Miss Lemon, contact Inspector Japp. I may require his assistance before this is over. The journey to Cornwall was a quiet one, with Hastings fidgeting nervously beside Poirot in the train compartment. The rolling hills gave way to rugged cliffs as they neared St. Lou, the seaside town where End House perched precariously above the sea. The manor itself was as Poirot remembered, a grand, weathered structure, its windows glowing against the dusk. But there was an air of unease, as if the house itself sensed the danger within. Mrs. Eleanor Vance greeted them at the door, a woman, in her late 40s, with sharp features and a practiced smile. Monsieur Poirot, what an honor, she said, her voice smooth. I was delighted to hear you'd accepted my invitation. And Captain Hastings, of course. Welcome to End House. Poirot bowed. Madame, your hospitality is most gracious, but I confess I was unaware of your invitation until my secretary informed me. A curious oversight, Nan. Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. A clerical error, no doubt. My staff are overwhelmed with the auction preparations. Please, come in. The other guests are eager to meet you. The drawing room was filled with local gentry, charity patrons, and a few familiar faces from London society. Poirot's eyes scanned the crowd, noting every detail, the nervous glances, the forced laughter, the way Mrs. Vance's hand lingered on the arm of a young woman introduced as her niece, Miss Clara Buckley. Clara was striking, with dark hair, and a defiant gaze that reminded Poirot of Nick Buckley in her youth. She claimed to be visiting from London, but her accent hinted at times spent abroad. As the evening progressed, Poirot observed Clara closely. She moved through the crowd with ease, charming guests and deflecting questions about her past. Yet there was something rehearsed in her manner, as if she were playing a role. During a lull in the conversation, she approached Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, my aunt says you're a detective of great renown. Is it true you once saved End House from tragedy? Poirot inclined his head. A case long past, mademoiselle, but End House, it seems, has a habit of attracting peril. Tell me, have you been here long? Clara's smile was coy. Only a week. Aunt Eleanor needed help with the auction. But I've heard the stories accidents, near deaths. It's almost as if the house is cursed. Her tone was light, but her eyes held a challenge. Before Poirot could probe further, a scream pierced the air. The guests turned to see a maid, standing at the edge of the terrace, her face pale. It's Mr. Langley. He's dead. The crowd surged toward the terrace, where a middle-aged man lay sprawled on the stone, a broken railing behind him. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands examining the scene. Mr. Langley, a local businessman, an auction donor, had fallen from the balcony above. But Poirot's keen eyes spotted something the others missed, a faint bruise on Langley's neck, suggesting he'd been struck before the fall. Inspector Japp, summoned by Miss Lemon, arrived within the hour. Another one, Poirot, he said, shaking his head. You attract trouble like a magnet. What's the story this time? Poirot gestured to the bruise. This was no accident, mon ami. Mr. Langley was murdered, and the fall staged to conceal it. The method recalls peril at end-house staged accidents to mask deliberate intent. But why Langley, and why here? Jap sighed. I'll have my men question the guests, but this place gives me the creeps. Too many shadows. As Jap organized the investigation, Poirot returned to the drawing room, where Clara Buckley was consoling her aunt. Mrs. Vance's composure had cracked. Her hands trembled as she clutched a handkerchief. Monsieur Poirot, this is dreadful, she said. First the threats, now this. I should never have held the auction. Poirot's ears pricked up. Threats, madame, of what nature? She hesitated, then produced a folded note from her pocket. It bore the symbol of 7 rings. This arrived yesterday. It warned me to cancel the auction or face consequences. I thought it was a prank. Poirot read the note. End house will fall again. The 7th shadow watches. He pocketed it, his mind racing. Madame, you must tell me everything. Who else knew of this? Only Clara, Mrs. Vance said. She urged me to hire extra security, but I didn't listen. Clara met Poirot's gaze. I wanted to protect Aunt Eleanor. End house has a history, as you know. I thought the note might be connected to, well, your old case. Poirot's moustache twitched. Indeed, and you, mademoiselle, have you received such notes? Clara shook her head, but her eyes flickered. Poirot made a mental note to investigate her further. The evening wore on, with Jap's men interviewing guests and Poirot observing from the sidelines. He noticed Clara slipping away during a moment of chaos, heading toward the upper floors. Excusing himself, he followed, his steps silent on the carpeted stairs. He found her in a small study, rifling through a desk. She froze as Poirot entered. Monsieur Poirot, I was looking for Aunt Eleanor's guest list to help the police. Poirot's smile was polite but firm. A curious place to look, mademoiselle. Perhaps you seek something else. A letter, perhaps, with 7 rings. Clara's face hardened. You're mistaken. I'm only trying to help. Before Poirot could press her, a loud crash echoed from below. They hurried downstairs to find a chandelier had fallen in the dining room, narrowly missing several guests. Jap was already there, barking orders. This is no coincidence. He said to Poirot, someone's trying to scare us off or worse. Poirot examined the chandelier's severed cable. Sabotage, Inspector. The work of someone familiar with this house, and I suspect they are still here. The night stretched on, with Jap's men searching the grounds and Poirot questioning the staff. He learned that Clara had arrived at End House unannounced, claiming a sudden desire to reconnect with her aunt, Mrs. Vance. Lonely and grieving, had welcomed her without question. But Poirot's instincts told him Clara was no innocent visitor at dawn. Poirot gathered Hastings, Jap, and Mrs. Vance in the library. Madame, he began, your niece is not what she seems. I believe she is connected to the Council of 7, a group orchestrating these attacks to discredit and destroy me. The murder of Mr. Langley, the chandelier, the threatening note-all are part of a scheme to revive the peril of End House. Mrs. Vance gasped, Clara, but she's family. She's been nothing but kind. Poirot held up a hand. Kindness, madame, can be a mask. I have observed Mademoiselle Clara's actions, her evasions. She knows more than she admits. Inspector, I suggest you search her room. Jap nodded, and within minutes, his men returned with a discovery. a hidden compartment in Clara's suitcase, containing a diary, a knife, and a sketch of the chandelier's wiring. The diary, written in Clara's hand, detailed her plan to stage accidents at End House, mirroring Nick Buckley's tactics. It also mentioned a council and a seventh shadow who had promised her wealth and power. Clara, brought before them, remained defiant. "You can't prove anything," she spat. "This is all conjecture." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "On the contrary, mademoiselle, your diary betrays you. And this," he held up a coded note found among her papers, identical to the one Mrs. Vance had received. "This links you to the Council of Seven. You sought to recreate the peril of End House, to trap me in a web of doubt and failure. But Hercule Poirot does not fall so easily." Clara's defiance crumbled. "I had no choice," she whispered. "They promised to protect me, to make me rich. They said you ruined Nick's life, that you deserved to suffer." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Nick Buckley's ruin was her own doing, mademoiselle, and you have chosen to follow her path. Inspector, take her away." As Japp led Clara to the police van, Mrs. Vance collapsed into a chair, weeping. "How could I be so blind?" she murmured. Poirot patted her hand. "You sought family, madame. It is no crime to trust, but trust must be tempered with caution." Back at the flat in London, Poirot sat with Hastings and Miss Lemon, the coded note from Clara's belongings spread before them. Miss Lemon, with her knack for patterns, had deciphered its meaning. A meeting of the council's allies was planned in London, disguised as a literary society. The note mentioned a number 1, a leader whose identity remained hidden. Hastings leaned forward. "This number 1 there, the key, aren't they? The one pulling the strings?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, mon ami. The 6 foes have struck, each through an ally or disciple. But the 7th, this number 1, is the true adversary. The little grey cells tell me we are close to unmasking them. Miss Lemon, prepare a list of literary societies in London. Hastings, pack your bag. We go to war." The fire crackled as Poirot leaned back, his mind already piecing together the next move. The peril of End House had been thwarted, but the greater battle loomed. The Council of Seven was not yet defeated, and Poirot knew the final confrontation would test him as never before. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. One more shadow had fallen, and Hercule Poirot remained unbroken. Chapter 8. The Council revealed. The fog clung to London's streets like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant chime of Big Ben. Hercule Poirot, his silver-topped cane tapping a steady rhythm, navigated the cobbled lanes of Bloomsbury with Captain Hastings at his side. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of coal smoke and secrets. Behind them, Chief Inspector Japp followed at a discreet distance, his bowler hat tilted low, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of pursuit. They were on their way to unmask the Council of Seven, the elusive cabal that had haunted Poirot's every step since the cryptic letter arrived at his flat. The letter, with its ominous warning of 7 shadows from your past and the symbol of 7 interlocking rings, had set this chain of events in motion. 6 foes disciples of Dr. Shepherd, Jane Wilkinson, Norman Gale, the ABC killer, Jacqueline de Bellaford, and Nick Buckley's cousin had struck, each weaving a web of murder and deception drawn from Poirot's most celebrated cases. Now, the trail led here to a nondescript townhouse masquerading as the meeting place of the Athena Literary Society. Miss Lemon's meticulous research had uncovered the truth. The society was a front, its gatherings a cover for the councils. Sinister assemblies. Poirot paused before the townhouse, its windows glowing faintly through the fog. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, his voice low but resolute, "tonight we enter the lion's den. The little grey cells, they are ready, but we must be vigilant. The council, they play for keeps." Hastings, his hand resting lightly on the revolver in his coat pocket, nodded. "I don't like it, Poirot. This number one chap, whoever he is, has been one step ahead of us. What if it's a trap?" "Trap or no trap," Poirot replied, his green eyes glinting, "Hercule Poirot does not retreat. The truth, it waits within. Come, let us don our masks." The plan was audacious, even by Poirot's standards. Miss Lemon had secured invitations to the Athena Literary Society's latest meeting, forging credentials that cast Poirot as a Belgian bibliophile, Hastings as his English cousin, and Jap as a retired publisher. Their disguises were subtle but effective. Poirot's moustache was trimmed slightly, his hair darkened with pomade. Hastings sported a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles. Jap, grumbling about the indignity, wore a false beard that itched terribly. They would infiltrate the meeting, identify the council's members, and, if possible, unmask the mysterious number one, the mastermind who had united Poirot's enemies against him. The door opened before Poirot could knock, revealing a thin, bespectacled man in a tweed suit. "Mr. Dupont?" he asked, eyeing Poirot's forged invitation. "Oui, c'est moi," Poirot replied, his accent deliberately thickened. "And this is my cousin, Mr. Harrow, and our friend, Mr. Baxter." The man nodded, ushering them into a dimly lit foyer. The air was thick with the scent of old books and wax polish. A murmur of voices drifted from the drawing-room ahead, where a dozen figures mingled, their faces half hidden in the glow of gas lamps. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room, noting the details: a woman in a crimson gown, her laughter too sharp; a man with a scar across his knuckles, his gaze darting nervously; a tall figure in a black coat, standing apart, his back to the room. Could that be number one? "Welcome to the Athena Literary Society," their host announced, clapping his hands. "Tonight we discuss the art of narrative deception in the works of Wilkie Collins. Please take your seats." Poirot, Hastings, and Jap settled into chairs near the back, their positions chosen for a clear view of the exits. The discussion began, a dry affair about the woman in white and unreliable narrators. But Poirot's attention was elsewhere. He studied the attendees, searching for clues to their true identities. The woman in crimson, he noted, wore a brooch shaped like 7 interlocking rings, the council's symbol. The scarred man fidgeted with a penknife, its blade catching. The tall figure in black remained silent, his presence commanding despite his reticence. As the discussion droned on, Poirot leaned toward Hastings and whispered, "Observe, mon ami. The players, they reveal themselves. The brooch, the knife, these are not accidents." Hastings frowned. "You think they're all part of it?" "Not all," Poirot murmured, "but enough. The council, they hide in plain sight, like wolves among sheep." Jap, scratching at his false beard, muttered, "I'd feel better with a few constables outside." "If this goes south, it will not," Poirot said firmly. "The little grey cells, they are our army." The meeting paused for refreshments, and the trio mingled, ears straining for any hint of the council's plans. Poirot approached the woman in crimson, offering a charming smile. Madame, your brooch is most intriguing. A family heirloom, perhaps. Her eyes narrowed, but she recovered quickly. A gift, she said, her voice smooth. From a dear friend with a fondness for puzzles. Puzzles, Poirot repeated, his tone light. I, too, enjoy them. Especially those with 7 pieces. Her smile faltered, and she excused herself, gliding toward the scarred man. Poirot watched them exchange a glance, their movements tense. He was about to follow when the tall figure in black turned, revealing a face half covered by a silk scarf. The man's eyes locked onto Poirot's, and for a moment the room seemed to still. Then he vanished through a side door, his coat billowing, like a spectre's cloak. Number 1, Poirot whispered, his heart quickening. He knows we are here. Before they could pursue, the host clapped his hands again, calling the group to order. A special guest wishes to address us, he said, gesturing to the side door. The scarred man stepped forward, his penknife now tucked away. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we are not merely lovers of literature. We are guardians of a greater truth, truth that certain meddlers seek to suppress. Poirot's fingers tightened on his cane. The room's atmosphere shifted, the pretense of the literary society crumbling. The woman in crimson locked the main door, while 2 other attendees blocked the exits. The scarred man continued, his voice rising. For too long, one man has played God with justice, unraveling our plans, destroying our allies. Tonight, we end his interference. Hastings reached for his revolver, but Poirot stayed his hand. Not yet, he hissed. We must know their full intent. The scarred man's eyes fixed on Poirot, though he gave no sign of recognizing him. Hercule Poirot, he said, spitting the name, thinks himself untouchable. But the Council of 7 has risen from the ashes of his victories. We are the heirs of those he crushed, Shepherd, Wilkinson, Gale, and the others, and we serve number 1, who will see Poirot fall. A murmur rippled through the room, and Poirot felt the weight of a dozen gazers. His disguise held, but for how long? Japp shifted uneasily, his hand inching toward his own concealed weapon. The scarred man raised a hand, and the side door opened again. The tall figure in black re-entered, his scarf now removed, revealing a face Poirot did not recognize, sharp-featured with cold, predatory eyes. This was number 1. Enough games, number 1 said, his voice low and commanding. Poirot's time is over. His obsession with order, with his precious little grey cells, has blinded him to the chaos we wield. Tonight, we expose him as a fraud, a manipulator, who bends justice to his whim. And tomorrow, we end him. Poirot's mind raced. Number 1's words echoed the global intrigue of the Big Four, a case where a shadowy cabal had sought world domination. Was this man a disciple of that syndicate, or something new? The mention of chaos suggested a personal vendetta, a grudge rooted in Poirot's past. But who? Number 1 gestured, and the woman in crimson produced a dossier. This, she said, contains evidence of Poirot's misdeeds cases, where he fabricated clues, coerced confessions, and ruined innocent lives. We will release it to the press, and the world will see him for what he is. Poirot's heart sank. Forged documents could do immense damage, even if disproved later. Public opinion was fickle, and the council knew it. He glanced at Hastings, whose face was pale but determined. Japp's jaw was set, his eyes promising retribution. They needed to act, but the room was a powder keg. Fascinating, Poirot said aloud, rising to his feet. His voice, still tinged with his feigned accent, carried a note of amusement. "But if I may, monsieur, a question. Why such theatrics? If this Poirot is so flawed, why not confront him directly? Why hide behind shadows and symbols?" The room stilled. Number one's eyes narrowed, searching Poirot's face. "You speak boldly for a stranger," he said. "Who are you?" "A man who values truth," Poirot replied, his tone steady. "And I find your tale incomplete. 7 shadows, you say, yet only 6 have struck. Where is the 7th? Or is number one himself the final piece?" A ripple of unease passed through the council's allies. The scarred man stepped forward, his penknife reappearing. "Enough," he snarled. "You're no bibliophile. You're Poirot." The woman in crimson gasped, her hand flying to her brooch. The disguise was undone. Chaos erupted. Hastings drew his revolver, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. Jap tore off his false beard, shouting, "Police!" Nobody moved. The council's allies scattered, some diving for cover, others lunging for the exits. Number one vanished through the side door, his laughter echoing. The scarred man charged at Poirot, his knife gleaming, but Hastings tackled him, pinning him to the floor. Poirot, calm amid the storm, seized the dossier from the woman in crimson as she fled. "Jap," he called. "The side door, number one. Must not escape." Jap barreled after the fleeing mastermind, but the fog outside swallowed number one's trail. Back in the drawing room, Hastings and Poirot restrained the scarred man, while the remaining attendees, some innocent, some complicit, were rounded up by Jap's reinforcements, who arrived moments later. The woman in crimson had slipped away, her brooch left behind as a taunting memento. As the police secured the scene, Poirot leafed through the dossier. Its pages were damning: forged letters, fabricated witness statements, and doctored photographs, all painting him as a corrupt meddler. Yet the forgeries were clumsy, the work of haste rather than genius. "They underestimate Hercule Poirot," he murmured, "but they are dangerous nonetheless." Hastings, bruised but triumphant, clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "That was too close, old chap. If they'd recognized you sooner, but they did not," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "And now we know their goal: to discredit me, to break my spirit before they strike the final blow. Number one, he is the key. His face, his voice, I have seen him before, but where?" Jap returned, panting and frustrated. "Lost him in the fog," he growled. "But we've got this lot in custody. The scarred bloke's singing already says he's a cousin of Norman Gale, out for revenge. The others are a mix. Some hired muscle, some fanatics. They all answer to number one, but none know his real name." Poirot nodded, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. The council's allies were scattered, their meeting disrupted, but number one remained at large, his endgame still in play. The dossier, though crude, could still wreak havoc if released, and the 7th shadow, the final piece of the council's plan, remained a mystery as they left the townhouse. The fog parting slightly to reveal the first stars, Poirot felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The Council of 7 was wounded but not defeated. Number one's laughter still rang in his ears, a promise of battles to come. Yet Poirot's resolve was unshaken. "The little grey cells," he said softly, "they have only begun to fight." Back at his flat, Poirot spread the dossier's contents across his desk, Miss Lemon at his side. Hastings nursed a brandy, while Jap coordinated with Scotland Yard by telephone. The forged documents were a patchwork of lies. But one detail caught Poirot's eye, a reference to a case from decades ago, a minor affair involving a financier named Blake. The name stirred a memory, faint but persistent. Could this be the thread that led to number 1? "Miss Lemon," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "search your files for any mention of a Blake financier, criminal or otherwise. He may be our shadow." Miss Lemon nodded, her efficiency a comfort in the storm. At once, Mr. Poirot, Hastings, leaned forward, his face etched with worry. "What now, Poirot? They've got the wind-up, but they're not done. That dossier will be their undoing," Poirot interrupted, his eyes blazing. "They seek to paint Hercule Poirot as a villain, but they forget. I am the master of truth. We will find number 1, and we will end this council. The 7 rings, they will break." The night stretched on, the flat a fortress of light against the darkness outside. Poirot's mind churned, replaying number 1's words, his face, his motives. The council had revealed itself, but the war was far from over. Somewhere in London, number 1 was plotting, his allies regrouping, and Poirot, with his loyal friends at his side, prepared for the next move in this deadly game of shadows. The townhouse raid had shaken the council, but it had also exposed Poirot's vulnerabilities. The public, unaware of the truth, might yet turn against him if the dossier's lies spread. Number 1's escape was a bitter blow, his identity still a tantalizing enigma. Yet Poirot's infiltration had yielded crucial insights. The council's structure, its obsession with his past, and its ultimate aim to destroy him not just physically, but in the court of public opinion. As dawn broke over London, Poirot stood at his window, watching the city awaken. The fog had lifted, revealing a skyline of chimneys and spires. Somewhere out there, number 1 waited, his plans unfolding like a chess grandmaster's. But Poirot was no pawn. He was Hercule Poirot, and he would not be outplayed. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, who had dozed off in an armchair, "the game, it grows more dangerous. But fear not. The little grey cells, they see the board clearly now." Hastings stirred, blinking. "You've got a plan, haven't you?" Poirot smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Always, Hastings, always." The Council of 7 had thrown down the gauntlet, and Poirot had picked it up. The battle for his legacy, his life, and the truth had entered a new phase. Number 1 might have escaped, but Poirot was closing in, his mind a beacon in the fog of deception. The 7th shadow loomed, but Hercule Poirot was ready to face it. Chapter 9. The Trap Tightens. Hercule Poirot sat in the dim light of his London flat, the curtains drawn tightly against the prying eyes of the world outside. The air was thick with the scent of his preferred tisane, a blend of herbs that usually calmed his nerves, but tonight it did little to soothe the storm brewing within his mind. His small, precise hands rested on the arms of his chair, fingers drumming a faint rhythm as his sharp grey eyes scanned the room. The neatness of his surroundings, every book aligned, every cushion perfectly placed, stood in stark contrast to the chaos now threatening to engulf his life. For days, whispers had turned into shouts. Forged documents, cunningly crafted and leaked to the press, accused Poirot of misconduct in his past cases. The accusations were vicious, tampering with evidence in the Ackroyd case, coercing witnesses in the Nile affair, even fabricating clues to secure convictions. Each claim was a dagger aimed at his reputation, and the public, ever fickle, was beginning to turn. Newspapers, once filled with praise for the great detective, now ran headlines questioning his integrity. "Has Poirot played us all?" screamed one tabloid. "The fall of a legend," declared another. Even the Times, usually restrained, published an editorial urging Scotland Yard to investigate. Poirot's lips twitched into a grim smile as he recalled the latest article. "They think to break Hercule Poirot with ink and paper," he murmured. To himself, "They underestimate the little grey cells." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Entres," he called, his voice steady despite the weight on his shoulders. Captain Hastings entered, his face flushed with indignation. He clutched a newspaper, its front page crumpled from his grip. "Poirot, have you seen this nonsense? They're calling you a fraud." "A fraud? It's outrageous. We must do something, sue them, demand a retraction, anything." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calm but commanding. "Mon ami, your loyalty is, as always, a comfort. But to react in haste is to play their game. Sit, Hastings. We must think, not shout." Hastings obeyed, though his agitation was clear as he dropped into a chair. "But Poirot, this isn't just gossip. They're dragging your name through the mud. I heard two chaps at the club this morning saying they wouldn't trust you to find a lost dog, let alone solve a murder. And Jappy's getting pressure from his superiors to bring you in for questioning." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Inspector Japp is a man of sense, Hastings. He knows the truth of my methods. But you are correct, the net is tightening. This is no accident. The Council of Seven, they orchestrate this campaign. They wish to isolate Poirot, to make him a pariah before they strike the final blow." Hastings leaned forward, his voice lowering. "You're sure it's them? That shadowy lot from the Literary Society meeting?" "Certainment," Poirot replied. "The forged documents bear the mark of their cunning. The accusations are too precise, too tailored to my past. Only those who have studied Hercule Poirot's cases, his triumphs, could craft such lies. And the symbol of the 7 rings, it has appeared again, has it not?" He gestured to a small envelope on the table, its edge singed as though someone had tried to burn it. Hastings picked it up, frowning, and opened it to reveal a single sheet of paper. Scrawled in black ink was a crude drawing of 7 interlocking rings, with a message beneath: "The world sees you now, Poirot, fall or be crushed." Hastings shuddered. "Good Lord, Poirot, this is getting personal. What do they want?" "They want Hercule Poirot destroyed," Poirot said simply. "Not merely my body, but my legacy. To make the world doubt my methods, my honor. But they will find that Poirot does not yield to slander." Another knock came, sharper this time. Miss Lemon entered, her usual composure frayed at the edges. She carried a stack of folders, her arms straining under their weight. "Mr. Poirot, I've been through every record I could find. Court documents, case files, even old newspaper archives. It's taken all night, but I've found something." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Formidable, Miss Lemon. Your efficiency is, as ever, a marvel. What have you discovered?" She set the folders on the table and opened the top one, revealing a series of financial records. "These are transactions from a private bank in London, one used by the city's elite. I traced them through a shell company mentioned in one of the forged documents. The money, hundreds of thousands of pounds, has been moving through accounts linked to the Council of Seven's allies, and they all lead back to one name: Sir Roderick Blake." Poirot leaned forward, his posture suddenly alert. "Blake, the reclusive tycoon. The man who owns half of Mayfair and keeps to his mansion like a hermit. The very same, Miss Lemon confirmed. He's been funding the council's operations, paying for the forgeries, bribing journalists, even hiring men to follow. I found a receipt for a private detective agency tasked with tracking your movements last month. Hastings let out a low whistle. Blake, I've heard of him. They say he's richer than Croesus and twice as ruthless. But why would a man like that care about you, Poirot? Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin, his mind racing. That, mon ami, is the question. Sir Roderick Blake is no ordinary foe. If he is indeed the number one of the council, as I suspect, then his motives are personal. There is a connection, a thread from my past, that binds us. Miss Lemon, have you found any link between Blake and my old cases? Miss Lemon shook her head. Not yet, Mr. Poirot. His records are locked tighter than a vault. But I did find this. She handed him a photograph, grainy but clear enough to show a younger Blake standing beside a man Poirot recognized instantly. Li Chang-yen, the mastermind of the Big Four. The two men were smiling, their arms around each other's shoulders, as if sharing a private joke. Poirot's breath caught. Mon Dieu, the Big Four. It is as I feared. Blake was not merely a bystander in their schemes. He was one of the more, at least, close enough to share their secrets. Hastings looked between Poirot and the photograph, bewildered. But Poirot, you dismantled the Big 4 years ago. Li Chang-yen is dead, isn't he? Oui, Hastings. Dead by his own hand, or so it seemed. But the Big Four was a hydra cut off one head, and another grows. Blake, perhaps, is that new head. And if he blames Poirot for the fall of his allies, then his vendetta is clear. Miss Lemon adjusted her glasses, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. There's more, Mr. Poirot. I intercepted a telegram sent to Blake's mansion this morning. It mentions a final stage to be executed within the week. Whatever they're planning, it's big and it's aimed at you. Poirot rose from his chair, his movements deliberate. Then we have no time to lose. The council seeks to crush Poirot, but they will find that the little grey cells are not so easily defeated. Miss Lemon, continue your search for Blake's past. Hastings, you will accompany me to Scotland Yard. We must warn Jap, and we must prepare. The fog hung heavy over London as Poirot and Hastings made their way to Scotland Yard. The streets were alive with the clatter of hooves and the hum of early motor cars. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle of Blake's vendetta, the accusations in the press, the forged documents, the symbol of the 7 rings all were threads in a tapestry designed to ensnare him. But why now? What had triggered this elaborate plot? At Scotland Yard, they found Inspector Japp. In his cramped office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, his face, usually ruddy with good humour, was drawn with worry. Poirot, he said, standing as they entered. I was about to send for you. This business with the papers, it's getting out of hand. My superiors are breathing down my neck. To bring you in, Poirot inclined his head, unruffled. And you, mon ami, what do you believe? Japp sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I believe you're the best detective I've ever known, and these accusations stink. Of a setup, but I'm in a bind. Poirot, the Home Office is involved now. They're talking about a formal inquiry. Then we must act swiftly, Poirot said. Inspector, I have reason to believe that Sir Roderick Blake is behind this campaign. He is the leader of the Council of 7, a group of my enemy's allies who seek my destruction. Miss Lemon has uncovered evidence of his financial dealings, and I suspect he plans a final strike within days. Japp's eyes widened. Blake, the tycoon. That's a tall order, Poirot. He's untouchable friends in Parliament, connections at the palace. If you're wrong, it'll be your head on the block. I am not wrong, Poirot said firmly. But I need your help, Japp. We must monitor Blake's movements, his associates. If we can catch him in the act, the council will crumble. Japp hesitated, then nodded. All right, Poirot. I'll put a few trusted men on it. But you'd better be right, or we're both done for. As they left Scotland Yard, Hastings glanced at Poirot, his expression troubled. Poirot, are you sure about this? Blake's a powerful man. If we go after him and fail, it's not just your reputation, it's prison, or worse. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. Failure, Hastings, is not an option. The council has declared war on Hercule Poirot, and I will meet them on the battlefield of the mind. Come, we have work to do. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Poirot retreated to his flat, transforming it into a war room of sorts. Maps of London covered the dining table, pinned with notes on Blake's known properties and associates. Miss Lemon worked tirelessly, cross-referencing financial records with old case files, searching for the elusive link between Blake and Poirot's past. Hastings, meanwhile, acted as Poirot's eyes and ears, gathering gossip from his club and keeping watch for suspicious figures near the flat. On the third night, as rain lashed the windows, Miss Lemon made a breakthrough. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. I've found it. A case from 1898, one of your earliest in London. You exposed a smuggling ring led by a man named Charles Blake, Sir Roderick's older brother. Poirot's eyes widened. Charles Blake, I remember. A ruthless man, hiding his crimes behind a veneer of respectability. I uncovered his network, and he was sentenced to life in Dartmoor. He died there, did he not? Miss Lemon nodded. He did, in 1902. But here's the key. Sir Roderick was his heir. He inherited Charles's fortune and, it seems, his grudge against you. There's a letter in the archives, written by Charles before his death, vowing revenge on the meddling Belgian who ruined him. Roderick must have found it. Hastings slammed his fist on the table. That's it, then. Blake's been nursing this hatred for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike, and now he's using the council to do it. Poirot nodded slowly, his mind racing. Hastings. The pieces fall into place. Blake is number one, the mastermind who unites the shadows of my past. The forged documents, the murders, the symbol of the 7 rings all, are his design to break me. But he has made one mistake. He has underestimated Hercule Poirot. Miss Lemon cleared her throat. There's one more thing, Mr. Poirot. I found a schedule for Blake's upcoming events. He's hosting a private dinner tomorrow night at his Mayfair mansion. The guest list includes several names linked to the council's allies. It could be their final meeting before the final stage mentioned in the telegram. Poirot's lips curved into a smile, though his eyes were hard. Formidable, Miss Lemon. Then tomorrow we shall pay Sir Roderick a visit. But we must be cautious. The trap is set, and we must not fall into it. The following evening, Poirot and Hastings stood in the shadows across from Blake's Mayfair mansion. The building loomed like a fortress, its windows glowing with warm light that belied the danger within. Carriages and motorcars lined the street, delivering guests in evening dress. their laughter carrying through the crisp night air. Poirot adjusted his overcoat, his moustache perfectly groomed despite the tension of the moment. "Hastings," he said quietly, "you will remain here and watch the entrance. If any of the council's allies attempt to flee, you must alert Japp's men who are stationed nearby." Hastings nodded, though his face was pale. "And you, Poirot? You're not going in there alone, are you? Nan, mon ami. I have arranged for an ally within." Poirot's eyes twinkled briefly. "Miss Lemon, she has secured an invitation for me, posing as a Belgian diplomat. Blake will not suspect until it is too late." Hastings gripped Poirot's shoulder. "Be careful, old chap. If Blake's as dangerous as you say, he won't hesitate to kill you." Poirot patted Hastings's hand. "Fear not, Hastings. The little grey cells are my shield. Now, go time is short." With a final nod, Poirot crossed the street and ascended the mansion's steps. The doorman, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, checked his invitation with a scowl before waving him inside. The interior was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and walls lined with priceless paintings. Guests mingled. In the grand hall, their voices a low hum of wealth and power. Poirot moved among them, his small stature and impeccable manners allowing him to blend seamlessly. He spotted several faces from Miss Lemon's files associates of the council's allies, their smiles masking their true intentions. At the far end of the hall, Sir Roderick Blake held court, his tall frame and silver hair commanding attention. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept the room, and for a moment they locked with Poirot's. A chill ran down Poirot's spine, but he forced a polite smile and raised his glass in a subtle toast. Blake returned the gesture, his expression unreadable, before turning back to his guests. Poirot's mind raced. "He knows I am here," he thought. "The game begins." As the evening progressed, Poirot eavesdropped on conversations, picking up fragments of the council's plans. A whispered mention of the theatre caught his ear, followed by a reference to the final spectacle. His heart quickened. The Theatre Blake's grand event, no doubt, was where the council planned to strike. But how and when? Dinner was announced, and the guests moved to a lavish dining room. Poirot took his seat, strategically placed near one of Blake's lieutenants, a man named Victor Crane, whose name had appeared in Miss Lemon's financial records. Crane was a former solicitor, disbarred for fraud, and now a key player in the council's schemes. Poirot engaged Crane in light conversation, his questions carefully probing. "You must find London society fascinating, Monsieur Crane," he said, his accent deliberately thick. "So many intrigues, Nan. I hear Sir Roderick is planning a grand event soon, a theatre performance, perhaps." Crane's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "You're well informed, Monsieur Dubois, was it? Sir Roderick does enjoy his spectacles, but I'm afraid I know little of his plans." "Pity," Poirot said, sipping his wine. "I am fond of the theatre, and of surprises." Crane excused himself shortly after, his discomfort evident. Poirot watched him whisper to Blake, who glanced in his direction. The trap was tightening, but not around Poirot, around Blake's allies. As dessert was served, Poirot slipped a note. To a waiter, one of Japp's undercover men. The note was simple: theatre. Final stage imminent. Watch Blake. He trusted Japp to act on it, positioning his team to intercept any moves the council made. The evening ended with a toast from Blake, his voice smooth and commanding. "Two new beginnings," he said, his eyes lingering on Poirot, "and to the Fall of old legends. The guests applauded, but Poirot felt the weight of Blake's words. This was no mere toast, it was a declaration of war. Poirot left the mansion under the pretense of a headache, rejoining Hastings in the shadows. "It is as I feared," he said, his voice low. "Blake plans his final strike at a theatre event. We must discover which one and when. Hastings, you will go to your club tomorrow and listen for any mention of Blake's plans. I will consult with Miss Lemon and Japp. The council believes they have cornered Poirot, but they will find that the hunter can become the hunted." As they parted, Poirot glanced back at the mansion, its lights blazing against the night. "Sir, Roderick Blake was a formidable foe, but Poirot had faced giants before. The little grey cells were at work, and they would not rest until the Council of Seven was brought to its knees." The rain began to fall again, a steady drumbeat that matched the rhythm of Poirot's thoughts. The trap was tightening, but not for him, for Blake, and for the shadows of Poirot's past. The end was near. Over the next 2 days, Poirot's team worked with relentless focus. Miss Lemon uncovered a contract for a private theatre in Covent Garden, booked by one of Blake's shell companies for the following evening. The event was billed as a celebration of London's elite, but Poirot knew it was a stage for his downfall. JAPP, meanwhile, reported that his men had spotted several of the council's allies entering and leaving Blake's mansion. "They're planning something big, Poirot," he said over a hurried telephone call. "My men are ready, but we need hard evidence to move on Blake. He's got lawyers who could bury us in paperwork for years." "Then we shall give you evidence," Poirot replied. "Tomorrow night, at the theatre, the council will reveal itself, and Hercule Poirot will be there to meet them." Hastings returned from his club with a crucial piece of the puzzle. A rumour that Blake's event would include a dramatic unmasking of a public figure. "They're saying it's a surprise," Poirot, Hastings said, his voice tense. "But I'd bet my last shilling it's you they plan to unmask." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "Then we shall prepare a surprise of our own. Hastings, you and Japp will ensure the theatre is surrounded. Miss Lemon will provide the evidence to expose Blake's crimes, and I, Hercule Poirot, will face number one on his own stage." The night of the theatre event arrived, and London buzzed with anticipation. The Covent Garden Theatre was a jewel of the city, its facade lit with golden lamps, its interior a maze of velvet curtains and gilded balconies. Poirot arrived alone, dressed in his finest evening attire, his cane tapping a steady rhythm as he entered the foyer. The crowd was a who's who of London's elite politicians, industrialists, even a minor royal. Poirot moved among them, his eyes scanning for Blake and his allies. He spotted Victor Crane near the bar, whispering to a woman Poirot recognized as an actress linked to the council. Another ally, a former doctor disgraced in the Gale case, lingered near the stage. Blake himself appeared as the lights dimmed, taking his place in a private box overlooking the stage. His silver hair caught the light, and his smile was that of a man who believed victory was assured. The performance began a lavish production of a new play, filled with veiled references to justice and betrayal. Poirot watched from the stalls, his mind alert. The unmasking was coming, and he knew it would be no mere theatrical flourish. Halfway through the second act, the play paused, and Blake rose from his box, his voice carrying over the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight we reveal a truth long hidden. A man among us, celebrated as a hero, is nothing but a fraud. "Step forward, Hercule Poirot." A spotlight swung to Poirot, and the crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled through the theatre, some shocked, others gleeful. Poirot rose, his posture erect, his expression calm. "Monsieur Blake," he said, his voice clear, "you accuse Hercule Poirot, but it is you who shall be unmasked." The crowd fell silent, sensing a drama greater than the one on stage. Poirot climbed the steps to the stage, his cane clicking. With each step, "You speak of fraud, Monsieur Blake, but it is your Council of Seven that deceives. You have forged documents, bribed journalists, and murdered to destroy me. But you have forgotten one thing: the truth cannot be buried." Blake laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "Bold words, Poirot, but where is your proof?" Poirot turned to the audience, his voice steady. "The proof is here, in the hands of Inspector Japp, who waits in the wings. The proof is in the financial records uncovered by my associate, Miss Lemon, linking you to the Council's crimes. The proof is in the symbol of the 7 rings, which you wear even now." He pointed to Blake's hand, where a ring glinted in the spotlight. The crowd murmured, and Blake's smile faltered. Before Blake could respond, Japp's men stormed the theatre, their footsteps echoing. Victor Crane tried to flee, but was caught at the exit. The actress screamed as she was detained. The doctor collapsed in his seat, his face ashen. Blake, cornered, lunged for a hidden door behind his box, but Poirot had anticipated this. Hastings, stationed nearby, blocked his path, his revolver drawn. "Not so fast, Sir Roderick," Hastings said, his voice steady. The audience erupted in chaos, some cheering, others shouting in disbelief. Poirot remained on the stage, his gaze fixed on Blake. "Your game is over, number 1. The shadows of my past are no more." Blake's eyes burned with hatred, but he said nothing as Japp's men handcuffed him. The theatre emptied, the crowd buzzing with the night's events. Poirot, Hastings, and Japp reconvened in the foyer, their faces grim but triumphant. "You did it, Poirot," Japp said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Blake's finished, and the council with him." "Not yet," Poirot said softly. "There is one final act. Blake must confess, and the world must know the truth." The next morning, Blake's confession dominated the headlines. Under pressure from Japp's evidence, he admitted to forming the Council of Seven, uniting the allies of Poirot's old foes to destroy him. The forged documents, the murders, the symbol of the 7 rings all were his design, driven by a decades-old grudge against Poirot for his brother's downfall. The public, so quick to doubt, Poirot now hailed him as a hero. Letters of apology arrived at his flat, along with invitations to speak at every major society in London. But Poirot, ever humble, declined them all. In his flat, surrounded by Hastings and Miss Lemon, Poirot raised a glass of tisane to the "little grey cells," he said, his eyes twinkling, "and 2 friends who never doubted them." Hastings laughed, and Miss Lemon smiled, her efficiency rewarded. The trap had tightened, but not around Poirot. The Council of 7 was broken, and Hercule Poirot stood taller than ever. But in the quiet of his mind, Poirot knew the final battle loomed. Blake's defeat was a victory, but the theatre event had been too public, too grand. The true endgame, he suspected, was yet to come. Chapter 10. The Mastermind's Game. The fog clung to London's streets like a conspirator, veiling the city in a shroud of secrecy as Hercule Poirot stepped out of his flat at Whitehaven Mansions. The morning was bitter, the air sharp with the promise of winter, But Poirot's mind burned with a clarity that no cold could dull. The cryptic letter, the 6 orchestrated crimes, the council of 7 all threads in a tapestry woven by a mastermind still lurking in the shadows. His little grey cells hummed with purpose, for today, he knew, would bring him closer to the elusive number 1 Hastings. Ever loyal, waited by the curb, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the chill. Poirot, you're certain about this. The papers are tearing you apart, and now you're off to chase a ghost in some tycoon's mansion. His voice carried the weight of doubt, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of admiration for his friend's unyielding resolve. Poirot adjusted, his hat, his moustache twitching with a faint smile. Mon ami, the papers may howl, but Hercule Poirot does not bow to their noise. The mansion of Sir Roderick Blake holds answers, and I shall have them. He tapped his cane lightly on the pavement, a signal to move forward. Come, Hastings. The game is afoot, and we must play it to the end. The drive to Blake's estate, nestled in the rolling hills of Hertfordshire, was a silent one. Poirot's thoughts churned over the clues accumulated thus far. The symbol of 7 interlocking rings, the echoes of his past cases. The financial trail Miss Lemon had uncovered linking the council to a figure of immense wealth. Sir Roderick Blake, a reclusive tycoon with rumoured ties to the Big Four, had emerged as the prime candidate for number 1. Yet Poirot knew better than to trust assumptions. The mastermind had orchestrated a campaign of such precision that every step felt like a move on a chessboard, with Poirot as both player and prize. The mansion loomed into view as their car wound through iron gates, its Gothic spires piercing the fog like accusations. Towers of grey stone flanked a sprawling courtyard, and windows glinted with the cold menace of eyes watching from within. A butler, stiff and impassive, greeted them at the entrance, his gaze lingering a moment too long on Poirot's immaculate attire. Sir Roderick is expecting you, Monsieur Poirot, the butler intoned, leading them through a grand hall adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Hastings whispered, "This place gives me the creeps. Like walking into a trap." Poirot's eyes scanned the hall, noting the opulence, the crystal chandelier, the Persian rugs, the faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. A trap, perhaps, Hastings but one set by a mind that underestimates Hercule Poirot. Observe and trust in the little grey cells. They were ushered into a study, its walls lined with bookshelves and a fire crackling in the hearth. Sir Roderick Blake stood by a window, his silhouette tall and commanding against the grey light. He was a man in his late 50s, with silver hair swept back and eyes that gleamed with the sharpness of a predator. His suit was tailored to perfection, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hand as he turned to greet them. "Monsieur Poirot," Blake said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Your reputation precedes you, though I confess the newspapers paint a rather unflattering picture these days." He gestured to a pair of leather chairs. "Please, sit, and Captain Hastings, is it a pleasure?" Poirot remained standing, his posture rigid. "Monsieur Blake, I am not here for pleasantries. A series of crimes, each a shadow of my past, has led me to your door. The symbol of 7 rings, the council of 7, the orchestrated slander all point to a mind of singular ambition. I believe that mind is yours." Blake's smile was thin, almost amused. "A bold accusation, monsieur. I am but a businessman, retired from the world's chaos. Why would I concern myself with your adventures?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Because, monsieur, the past does not sleep. A case, long buried, where I exposed a man's crimes. Perhaps a brother, a kin of yours, has festered in your heart. You have united the allies of my old foes, formed this council, and now seek to destroy me. But Hercule Poirot does not fall so easily. The room grew still, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Blake's expression hardened, and for a moment Poirot glimpsed the truther, flicker of rage, quickly masked. "You weave a fascinating tale," Blake said, moving to a decanter on a side table. "Care for a drink? Or does the great detective abstain?" "I abstain from poison," Monsieur Poirot replied sharply. Hastings shifted uncomfortably, his hand inching toward his coat pocket, where Poirot knew he kept a revolver. Blake chuckled, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid. "Poison. You see enemies everywhere, Poirot. But let us suppose, for a moment, that I am this. Number one, what then? You are alone, disgraced, your allies dwindling. The public believes you a fraud. What hope have you against a man of my resources?" Poirot's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of certainty. "Hope, monsieur, lies in the truth. And the truth is this: your counsel has overreached. Each crime, each echo of my past has left a trace. The diary of Dr. Shepherd, the dental tool of Norman Gale, the railway guide of A.B.C. all carefully chosen, yet all betraying your hand. You cannot resist the flourish, the need to prove your cleverness. That is your weakness." Blake's hand tightened around his glass, but before he could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the room. The window behind him shattered, glass spraying inward as a bullet grazed his shoulder. He staggered, cursing, as Poirot and Hastings dove for cover behind a sofa. "Stay down," Hastings shouted, drawing his revolver. Poirot's mind raced. This was no accident, but a calculated move. An assassin hired not to kill Blake, but to disrupt, to force Poirot's hand. Footsteps pounded outside the study, and the butler burst in, only to collapse as a second shot rang out. Poirot crawled to the door, peering into the hall. A figure, in black, face masked, sprinted toward the courtyard, a rifle slung over their shoulder. Hastings after him. Poirot barked, though he knew pursuit was futile in the fog dot. Blake, clutching his wounded shoulder, snarled from the floor. "You see, Poirot, you bring death wherever you go. This is your doing." Poirot rose, brushing dust from his coat. "Nan, monsieur, this is your doing. The assassin was meant to unsettle me, to make me doubt, but I see clearly now. You are number one, and this mansion is the heart of your web. I will prove it." Hastings returned, breathless. "Lost him in the fog, Poirot. We need to get out of here. This place is a death trap." But Poirot shook his head. "Not yet, mon ami. We search the mansion. There will be evidence, a letter, a ledger, something to confirm Blake's role. We do not leave until we have it." Blake laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Search all you like, Poirot. You'll find nothing but your own ruin." The next hours were a tense exploration of the mansion's labyrinthine halls. Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes catching details others missed: the faint scuff of a shoe on a staircase, a drawer slightly ajar, a hidden panel behind a portrait. Hastings, though uneasy, followed his lead, checking rooms for threats. They found little at first. Guest rooms, a library, a locked armory that Hastings noted with concern. But in Blake's private office, concealed behind a false bookshelf, Poirot uncovered a safe. "Mon ami, your skills, if you please," Poirot said, gesturing to the lock. Hastings, who had picked up a knack for such things during their adventures, knelt and set to work with a set of tools from his pocket. The safe clicked open after several tense minutes, revealing a leather-bound ledger, a stack of letters, and a small velvet box. Poirot's gloved hands moved swiftly, opening the ledger first. Its pages detailed payments to names Poirot recognized as of Dr. Shepherd, Jane Wilkinson, Norman Gale, and others. Each entry was coded, but the pattern was clear. Funds funneled through shell companies to finance the council's operations. The letters were more damning, written in Blake's own hand, instructing his allies on their roles in the crimes. One bore the symbol of 7 rings, a wax seal pressed into the paper. The velvet box held a ring, its band etched with the same symbol. Poirot held it to the light, his expression grim. The proof, Hastings. Sir Roderick Blake is number 1. And this is his signature. Hastings whistled softly. Good Lord, Poirot, you've got him. But we're still in his house, and that assassin's out there. What now? Before Poirot could answer, the office door slammed open, and 3 men in dark suits stormed in, pistols drawn. Hands up, Poirot, one barked. You're coming. With us, Poirot raised his hands slowly, his voice calm. Gentlemen, you are employed by Sir Roderick. I suggest you reconsider your loyalty. The evidence in this safe will see him imprisoned, and those who aid him will share his fate. The leader hesitated, glancing at his companions. Poirot seized the moment, stepping forward with the authority of a man who knew he held the upper hand. You are pawns in a game you do not understand. Leave now, and you may yet escape justice. The men wavered, then lowered their weapons and fled, their footsteps echoing down the hall. Hastings exhaled. That was too close. Poirot, how did you know they'd back down? I did not, mon ami, Poirot admitted, a faint smile playing on his lips. But the guilty are often cowards when faced with the truth. Now, we take these documents and leave. Blake will not let this stand. They slipped out of the mansion, the fog their ally as they reached their car. Poirot clutched the ledger and letters tightly, knowing they were the key to dismantling the council. But as they drove back to London, a new realization settled in his mind. Blake had anticipated their discovery. The assassin, the armed guards each, was a move to delay, to distract. The true trap was yet to come. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot spread the documents on his desk, Miss Lemon at his side. Her efficiency was unmatched, her fingers flying over her typewriter as she catalogued the evidence. These payments trace back to Blake's offshore accounts, she reported. He's been funding the council for years, using proxies to hide his involvement. But there's something else, a reference to a final spectacle planned for London. No details, but it's set for 3 days from now. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A spectacle, Mademoiselle Lemon. Then it is a performance, and Hercule Poirot shall be its critic. Blake believes he can end me with this grand gesture, but he forgets I, 2 a.m., a master of the stage. Hastings, pacing the room, stopped short. Poirot, you're not seriously thinking of walking into another trap? The man tried to have you shot. Nan, Hastings, he tried to frighten me, Poirot corrected. The bullet was not meant to kill, only to unsettle. Blake plays a psychological game, but he does not yet know the strength of Hercule Poirot's mind. We will prepare, and when the time comes, we will turn his spectacle against him. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of activity. Poirot, Hastings, and Miss Lemon worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the ledger's entries with police records provided by Inspector Japp, who, despite the public's clamour, remained loyal to his old friend. Japp's face was grim as he reviewed the evidence. "This is enough to put Blake away for life, Poirot. But he's slippery. He's got friends in high places, and those forged documents have done a number on your reputation. We need to catch him in the act." "Precisement," Poirot agreed. "And we shall, mon ami. The spectacle is his weakness, his need to gloat. He will reveal himself, and we will be ready." As the third day dawned, a cryptic invitation arrived at Poirot's flat, sealed with the symbol of 7 rings. It requested his presence at the Royal Lyceum Theatre, where a celebration of justice would take place that evening. The invitation was unsigned, but Poirot knew its author. "Blake's final move," he murmured, tucking the card into his pocket. "He wishes to humiliate me before the world." "So be it," Hastings protested, but Poirot was resolute. "We go, mon ami, but not unprepared. Contact Japp. Tell him to have his men at the theatre, discreetly. Miss Lemon, prepare a dossier of the evidence for the press. If Blake wishes a spectacle, he shall have one he does not expect." The Royal Lyceum Theatre glowed with the warmth of chandeliers as Poirot and Hastings arrived, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. The event was billed as a charity gala, but Poirot sensed the undercurrent of malice. Blake was there, moving through the crowd with the ease of a king, his shoulder bandaged but his demeanour unruffled. He caught Poirot's eye and raised a glass. In mock salute, the programme began with speeches, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere, scanning the theatre for signs of danger. He noted the exits, the ushers, who seemed to alert the faint bulge of a weapon beneath a waiter's jacket. Blake's trap was multifaceted, but Poirot had anticipated as much as the lights dimmed for a special presentation. A spotlight fell on Poirot, and a voice boomed from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we honour a man whose name was once synonymous with justice, but who now stands accused of deceit. Hercule Poirot, step forward." The crowd murmured, some jeering, others curious. Hastings gripped Poirot's arm, but the detective rose, his head high. "Let us play this game, Hastings," he whispered, striding to the stage. Blake appeared beside him, his smile venomous. "Monsieur Poirot, the world demands answers. Forged documents, allegations of misconduct. How do you plead?" Poirot faced the crowd, his voice steady. "I plead the truth, monsieur. You, Sir Roderick Blake, are the architect of a conspiracy, the leader of the Council of 7. You have revived the ghosts of my past to destroy me, but you have failed." Gasps rippled through the audience. Blake laughed, but Poirot pressed on, producing the ledger from his coat. "This book, found in your mansion, details your crimes. Payments to murderers, instructions for deception, all in your hand. You are number 1, and your reign ends tonight." Blake's composure cracked, and he lunged for the ledger, but Poirot was ready. Stepping aside as Japp's men surged from the wings, the crowd erupted in chaos, but Poirot's voice cut through. "Mesdames et messieurs, the truth is my shield. Sir Roderick Blake sought revenge for a brother I exposed, but justice reviles." Blake was restrained, his face a mask of fury, as Japp read his rights. The evidence, broadcast to the press by Miss Lemon's foresight, turned the tide of public opinion. By morning, Poirot's name was cleared, and Blake's empire began to crumble. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat by the fire, The ledger now in Japp's hands. Hastings, exhausted but relieved, poured them both a brandy. You did it. Poirot, you outsmarted the devil himself. Poirot sipped his drink, his eyes distant. None, Hastings. I merely trusted in the little grey cells. Blake's game was clever, but the truth is always simpler. Now we prepare for the final act, for the council's remnants will not rest. The chapter closed with Poirot gazing into the fire, his mind already turning to the next move in a game far from over, his resolve as unyielding as ever. Cues.